Hello. Hi, everyone. I just wait for a few of you to arrive. It's always a bit odd at this moment when there's no one's here, no comments. And you just think, I'm just sat in a room talking to myself. But increasingly, that's probably going to be a feature of my life. So, um, hello, Chris. Great to see you doing another live. But did you have time to make your pancakes? Yes, I did. I made time to make pancakes. Funnily enough, when I was learning to cook a few years ago, I only learned over the last few years. Pancakes were the first thing I ever made. It was a pancakes day or Shrove Tuesday, as you should more accurately describe it. And I just fancied some pancakes, and I thought, oh, why don't you have a go making some? Nothing I'd ever made previously had ever worked out well. And I made some pancakes, and they came out okay. And I thought, wow, I can't believe it. Maybe I should try making something else. And then I tried something else, and that came out well. And then I just got bitten by the bug. So yes, I did make some pancakes this evening. Hi to Lil Unicorn there. Hi to Truth Will Out. Hi to Layla. Hi to Anna. Good morning, Anna. Hope you're well. Hi to Zoe. Hi to Flying Foxy. I bet you're an expert at making them then. I wouldn't say I'm an expert. I'd say that I'm competent. My cooking is not bad, decent, but I don't want to. I don't have any pretension of being like a chef or anything. I can knock out a fair few things though. Hi to Darren. Hi to Bernie. Hi to at 13 Note. Hi to Diana. Hi to Patrick. Hi to Gwyneth. Hi to Alim's Beauty, I think that is. Hi to Julie. Hi to Yelda. Someone's asked for a comment on the CCRC statement. So we're discussing that later with Jonathan. Jonathan's going to come in a bit. I've just seen. So when I do these things, you don't appreciate this, but I can see myself all the time. As far as I can see, there's no way to get rid of that. It's really annoying. But I was watching. It's funny watching yourself back. I try not to do it too much. And two things I noticed is I do this all the time. I never realized I did that, but I've just noticed that I do this all the time. and I've noticed now that I do it when I'm not on camera. I don't know why I do that. And also like rubbing my nose. I think partly rubbing my nose is congestion, but also it's like it makes you a bit self-conscious when you just can see a video of yourself non-stop for 3 hours. Hi to Elder, hi to Maxine, hi to So Hard to Find, hi to Pete, hi to Stuart, hi to Mark, hi to DI. Thank you for your comment. Good to see you. Thank you so much for updating the public and those viewers on YouTube. You've done an amazing job, and I'm hooked. I applaud you for your efforts. Thank you. Very much appreciated. So there's some comments about CCRC here that we'll get into. Hi to Mark. You're extra big on my second screen. What a horrible prospect for you. Hi to Mr. G. Hi to Topsy Turvy. Hi to Leo. I follow you in this case from Brazil. Amazing videos and job. Great. Thanks for following us from Brazil. You may know that Clucy's from Brazil. His biggest Twitter account talking about Lucy Letby. Should have got a bottle of water. I've only got this water bottle, but it'll be okay. I watched the documentary on Omar Benguit, been with the CCRC for 5 years, in the case of Michael Stone about 2.5 years, and now Lucy Letby 1 year running. Why so little political will to speed along? So we'll be talking about that later on. So we'll get into that later on. I do have a few things to discuss with you before I invite Jonathan on. So the first thing is I've had to. I mean, you will have noticed anyway, but I've had to slow down a bit with responding to comments because I think I got about 4,000 comments in about 4 days recently. Hi to Jenny, good to see you here. And it's just obviously became impossible to keep up. So, excuse me, I have slowed down a little bit because when things took off over the last few days, over the last week or so, I've not only do you get comments on your new videos, but it pushes all your old videos out to other people, and then I've just been getting thousands and thousands and thousands. So I try and keep up as much as I can. But it really helps to post comments, because they're the most important algorithmic indicator for YouTube. So the fact that I've had a lot of comments has helped in that regard. So that's really important. Just bear with me. I might have to get a bottle of water. I might have to go downstairs and get a bottle of water when Jonathan's here, because this is virtually had it. So another thing I need to tell you is, I mentioned this comment about having a picnic, right? So I thought to myself, maybe I should look at the logistics of this. And unfortunately, it's just not going to be possible, because if you want to congregate in Hyde Park, if it gets above 30 people, you have to seek permission. If it gets above 100 people, you have to treat it like a public event and seek permission and all kinds of stuff. And I've already got over 6,000 subscribers. I just got 50 more today. By the time this happened, I could have 10,000. I'm certainly going to have more than 6,000. I don't know how many. But if just 0.1% of people turned up, it's already 60. And, if 1% turned up, that'd be 600. And it's just not possible. It was a really nice idea, but unfortunately, the scale of things I'd literally be breaking the law. So there's just, and I think I can't go through the full process of like organizing something public. It's just impossible. So what I will say is there's lots of plans for me to do public events and public appearances. So I will definitely be appearing at lots of public events. It's, that's probably the best thing to do. And then someone can organize those. It will be, obviously I'll update you as soon as I know. There'll be more and more stuff happening this year. It's going to be a very busy year, no doubt. But I'll try and go all over the country. I don't know exactly what's going to happen yet. I'll just let people know. And if I think it's going to be feasible to do something in Hyde Park, I mean, Unicorn suggesting here, one of my followers could organise something. If that's possible, I suppose. But anyway, just leave it with me. But all I will say is that the idea that you can just say, "Oh, come up and bring a picnic blanket, and bring some food and be in Hyde Park." Unfortunately, it's not as simple as I thought it was going to be. I thought I could just put it on YouTube. I'll be here at this date, turn up, but unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. That's something that I'm aware of now. So someone's saying Anna's saying congratulations on 6K. So thank you. I mean, obviously I should be thanking you, really. I do the best that I can to make the channel as good as I can, but without your support, it can't happen, obviously. So I never for 1 second thought I'd get to 6,000 subscribers in, I mean, really I only started it's 10 months since my first video, and it's really only 8 months since I started posting properly. Because I don't know if anyone remembers, but after my first video, I went away. I didn't post anything for like nearly 2 weeks because I was really busy. So I didn't even start properly until June, and then it's just taken off. So I mean, I'm really glad. I think a lot of it obviously reflects how big that this is getting, and I think Netflix has, broadly speaking, backfired. Although I have had a small influx of people making pro-guilty comments. Generally, I ignore them, but I've noticed everyone else is jumping on them. So all it's really doing is amplifying the algorithm for this channel. That's why comments are so important as well. So yeah, it's really nice, and I really appreciate that. Someone's saying, hope your public events won't forget the North. So they definitely won't. The intention is to go all over the country. I don't know what that's going to look like yet, but absolutely the intention is to go all over. What else do I need to discuss? So we're getting close. I'm getting very close in the next day. Right, you can't have that, Keeks. Hold on 1 second. You're not having that. That's all you know. Sorry, Kiko was going to get a plastic bottle, which is a very noisy proposition. I will definitely make sure I go over the country. I mean, I'm a northerner. I know no one can tell from my accent now, but I was originally a northerner, so I definitely want to come all over the country for sure. What I was going to say was I'm getting close to 1 million views as well. I'm on 990,000 views. I wonder if it's updated today. Let's have a look. Whoops, press wrong button. Just bear with me. So I'm on 995,796. So tomorrow it should be 1 million plus. So, I mean, there's no way I thought that would happen when I posted my first video. That occasionally someone will comment on it, and I'll see it and I'll think, God, the thumbnail's terrible, the title's terrible, the presentation's terrible, the audio's terrible. So yeah, I mean, I've definitely kind of improved since then. So, so there's a couple of questions about a channel that I won't mention. So I may look at that at some point. What I would say is that particular video made comments that are very obviously libelous. I don't suppose for 1 second that those in question would wish to take legal action, but yeah, essentially there are libelous remarks in that video. Whether I'll respond to it or not, I don't know. Obviously, I'll never directly respond to another person because I don't want to do stuff like that, because there's so many people out there who try and piggyback off others, and I don't want to do that. I just want to do my own work. And if people comment about me, I never respond. People are perfectly free to say whatever they want. I just concentrate on doing my own work. But I may respond to that. But please be assured, if I do respond to some of the claims in that video, then it will be, probably obstetrician, neonatologist, neonatal nurse, pediatricians I know, other doctors, and I'll have them, obviously. So hi to Julia Todd. Lovely to meet you speaking live, Christopher. Nice to have you. Really appreciate everyone coming. It's always a nice thing to do. Are you sulking, Cakes? Sorry. I left a comment on Art of Law's video about the CCR statement was trolled. I outwitted the troll. That doesn't take too much. I mean, usually, with the greatest respect to people who post pro-guilty comments, they're very rarely coherent, in my experience. I did respond to one the other day. I usually leave it to you guys to respond, but someone made this comment about, just because no one saw anything, what about all these other serial killer cases where no one saw anything? And he put John Gacy down there. Well, John Gacy, they found 40 dead bodies in his house. So it's not really the same, is it? But, I just ignore them generally. They can say whatever they want. I mean, I don't ban people. I only ban people if they're... The thing is, usually they do start to make personal comments or be abusive, or if they just get too annoying and they're just constantly bombarding the thread, even though that helps my channel algorithmically. If they get too annoying, I'll get rid of them. But if people want to say, she's guilty, end of. That's the usual comment. That's fine. How do we in America get your book? So I need to have a discussion with the publisher about the international market. We are aware of this and we do intend to make it available. These very early listings are for the British market, which is obviously the primary market, but my intention is to make this international. So it will definitely be available in all the English-speaking countries. And there may be a little bit of a focus on the Netherlands as well because of Lucia de Burke. And of course, it will be available in Europe. I don't know all of the details, of course. So, some people have asked me, will it be in foreign languages? Will it be in German? Will it be in Dutch? I think that's pretty... There could conceivably be an ebook version. A good thing to do would be an audiobook, but obviously I don't speak German or Dutch, so I don't know. I don't know about other languages, but it will be made available in other countries, and as soon as I can get you the details, I will. But I mean, I know you're in America, Jenny. It will be on US Amazon for sure, no doubt. And the audiobook, if you want to hear my dulcet tones, will be universal, of course, because it's just one platform on Audible. So things like ebook, audiobook are easy for international market. The distribution for paperbacks and hard books is kind of trickier. Anyway, I should invite Jonathan in. I think I've covered all the topics. Oh, let me just say this last thing. So, I posted a video today, and I'm doing this live stream today, obviously. So the live stream will be on my channel tomorrow. On the 19th, I won't be posting, and the reason for that is that Guy Rowland's film is coming out on the 19th. That I've already seen a sneak preview of. I was lucky. Willie asked me to help him a little bit. I didn't really do anything, but I've seen it. So I'm leaving the kind of YouTube highway free for Guy on the 19th, so that his film can have a free run without me cluttering it up as well. So I'm going to remind people that tomorrow in comments and on the 19th. But we need as many people as possible to go onto Lucy Letby Films channel. Again, I will do a post to remind people of this, and just at 9 o'clock. So it's coming out at 10 a.m. To just be there at 10 a.m. commenting, watching it all the way through, liking it, all the things you do for me, and just try and make it as big as we can. With that being said, I'll try and invite Jonathan. Hold on a second. I never remember how to do this. Just bear with me. There we go. Right. There we go. Now I've got to find Jonathan. Just bear with me, sorry. Right, here we go. Right, there we go. I've managed to do it now. So hopefully, all being well, technologically speaking, Jonathan will be here soon. It's always a bit weird doing this because you only do it every couple of weeks. And then I haven't invited a guest for a month. So hopefully it's going to work out. So someone's suggesting an interview with Sir David Davis. So I think he won't do podcasts, basically. I happen to know. So I don't think that's possible, unfortunately. Will you come to the Belfast area? It's really going to be up to my publishers to decide this, but I'm not averse to coming to the Belfast area. I mean, I am actually basically Irish. All my family are Northern Irish. So when my grandma passed away, when I went to her funeral, basically everyone was Irish apart from me and my brother. So it was a bit weird, but there's a good possibility that I would, but I can't really say for sure. Yeah, so hopefully Jonathan will be joining soon. Here we go. There he is. Yeah, so hopefully Jonathan will be joining soon. Hi, Jonathan. Could you just mute your video, please? Could you?
Yeah, I will.
Yeah, there was.
Great. Hi. Hello.
Hey, how are we doing? How's things?
I'm very well, thank you. Very well indeed.
Good.
A lot going on.
Yeah, a lot been going on the last 2 weeks, indeed. Been extremely busy, hasn't it? So we've got a lot of things to discuss. So something that someone's asked me about already is the CCRC statement that I don't know if you've seen that over the last few days, where they released a kind of updated schedule of what has occurred so far. So do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, there's an amazing video on it. A guy who does quite a few videos. He changed my view completely, actually. I looked at it rather superficially and didn't really understand. So it's a bit of a sort of it's needling the lawyers, actually. It's needling Mark MacDonald a bit, and I have to say some of it was quite concerning because it's quite critical of how. I mean, what it was basically saying is the public seem to think that we're dawdling and we're not pulling our weight and we're not pulling our finger out, but actually what they've done is sort of set out a timetable of what's happened, and basically it does appear because. The first submission was made in February, and they've said that in February they asked her to relinquish her.
To waive privilege.
Waive privilege. That's right. They wanted her to waive privilege. They asked if she would waive privilege in February. But the document says quite clearly that they didn't waive privilege until December. And in fact, that's the first any of us have heard that privilege has been waived. The other thing which was quite concerning is I think Mark McDonald did his sort of theatrical of taking the files to the CCRC in May. I think that must. Do you remember when it was actually that?
Oh, I can't. But it must have.
Yeah. It was spring, wasn't it? I think.
I thought it was a little bit earlier than May, but it was around about that time.
Yeah. So the main thing it said that because it sets it all out in the document that certain reports and various evidence was submitted, but unless you actually submit a submission to the CCRC, so they can receive reports, they can receive evidence, but what they want is a submission to ask them exactly what they should be doing with that, or what question you're asking and what the significance of something is. And they've said in that document that the only submissions that were given were in May. They said in September that they'd be giving one, but in fact it didn't turn up until October. And the third submission came in January. So it's basically saying, you've been slow to submit the submissions that we need to push this case forward. So it was quite a critical document. It was sort of saying, look, you're saying we're slow, but actually we've not been provided with what we need to take this further. Is that what you're? Did you see that today?
I haven't watched it yet. I always think, for me, I try and understand the legal aspects of the case, but as I have no real input into them, I feel like I shouldn't become too immersed in them because I'm not a lawyer and I'm never going to be involved in the legal aspect. So no, I haven't seen the actual video, but I saw people commenting on it. But I'll probably watch it at some point. I just do you have any thoughts on why it took so long to? I mean, I know that Mark has delayed this waiving of privilege. Do you have any thoughts on why that was?
I don't know. I mean, I was educated a lot by you and what you said in your videos about waiving privilege and what other people have said. And from what I understand, it's absolutely essential in an appeal that you do waive privilege, because you're not going to get anywhere if you don't waive privilege. And I am quite surprised that if they are saying they specifically asked for privilege to be waived in February and then it didn't happen until December, and then what happens when you waive privilege is that you then suddenly start that they can then release sort of documents that can be used. So I don't know whether the waiving of privilege made a big difference if it only happened in December when they wanted it to happen back in February.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why there was a delay. All I know is I knew that she would waive privilege. I mean, it was obvious. I knew that would happen. The only thing I can really think is that there may have been some discussion between her current and previous defence in some respect. I don't know whether that would happen. That could be completely wrong. I haven't got a clue. But I just wonder if that has happened. Can I just say, I know something that no one watching this knows that I can't tell you. What I can say about that is this. I can only say this. When it comes to the actual waiving of privilege, I don't think people need to be concerned that there is some conversation between Lucy and her previous barrister, that is of concern. I don't know that for certain, but based on what I do know, I think it's nothing. The delay is nothing to do with there being any kind of not incriminating, but some smoking gun or horror, something that really would cause problems to the appeal. I mean, I have reason to believe that's not the case, but I don't know. I don't understand this whole legal process. It seems, I don't know if you have thoughts on this, Jonathan, but it seems so unfair that your original barrister, you can be completely innocent. Not only in this case can you be innocent, but you're literally in prison for something that didn't happen, where there's no crime at all. And yet
Exactly.
the system can say to you, "Oh, but your previous barrister made a pig's ear of the case, so we're just going to keep you in prison." I mean that just seems extraordinary.
I know. I suppose it's a defense against it puts pressure on them to do a really good job the first time, because they can't be in a position where they can think, oh dear, well, this didn't go very well the first time, so we'll have a second shot at it, because the court system is so stretched anyway. So I suppose that's the pressure. But the inference is, as you say, is that if your defense team does a very bad job for you, then it, you're in a terrible position, because getting an appeal if the original court case didn't go well, it seems virtually impossible. So
I mean, do you
yeah,
know
it's
what?
horrendous. It is absolutely
You know
horrendous.
what could theoretically happen, and we know it hasn't happened, but all of these experts, every single one of these experts, like 31 people in the panel, they all could have contacted Ben Myers, and then Ben Myers could have said, "Oh, I don't think we need to put any of them in court, Lucy." and then you wouldn't be able to, that would really count against her. Obviously, that hasn't happened. Thankfully, that hasn't happened. But Lucy obviously would have said, "Fair enough, you're my barrister," and then I don't know. It just seems. I just find this whole field of legal.
Well, Nina Modi did contact.
Yes.
Nina Modi did contact, didn't she? And did
Yeah.
sort of offer support, and just didn't happen. So I don't know.
We don't know the full details of that. Maybe it was a bit late in the day, but yeah. So that's our thoughts on the CCRC anyway. I just got a couple of questions that I'll go through. Hold on a second, I pressed the wrong button. Yeah. When will my book be available? So it's the Thursday, the 9th of July this year. And someone's asked me, is Lucy aware of you advocating for a very unlikely? If she is aware of it, it's not because I've contacted her. But that.
Well, I've written to her and mentioned you, so there we
go. Okay, so. Well, Lucy may be aware of it then. I don't know, but we'll see. Yeah. So what else were we going to discuss? Bear with me. I've just got to find something on this list. Hold on. There we go. Also, we're going to discuss the Netflix, weren't we? So I haven't spoken to you since the Netflix documentary came out and was broadcast. So it had very little of any substance in it, but what were your kind of overarching thoughts about that?
Well, the penny suddenly dropped as I started watching it and thinking, well, of course, the police are going to have complete control over this, because they've supplied all this sort of never seen before footage and all the. So I suddenly realized at the beginning, and I think I would say it was about 70% prosecution and 30% defendant in terms of the emphasis of the program. I did just think it was extraordinary that they made no attempt whatsoever to sort of address some of the incredible evidence that completely refutes most. So they were still sort of sticking with the statistics, they were still sticking with the insulin, they were still sticking with so I thought that was incredible. But then what else can they do? I mean, the police have got nothing else that they can fall back on, and they're not going to try and refute any of it. So that was incredible. But I just did find it absolutely harrowing to watch the arrests, and and I suppose for the first time, what it did make was it did. None of us have ever really heard Lucy speak, or she's sort of not been a very human figure to most of us. And it was for the first time that we really got a feel for her personality, and just saw how she reacted, which was incredible, really. You know, the way she spoke to her parents, the way she hugged her cat, the way she and again, I thought it was absolutely incredible that having had Nicholas Johnson making such a big thing about her, not going out into the street in her pajamas, and there you see in the Netflix that she's out in the street in her pajamas. You just think that's incredible that the police would. So there was. I suppose the thing about the Netflix is that I did give a personalized, a sort of human side to Lucy, which we'd never seen before, which I found very, very interesting, very very helpful, really.
Yeah, I mean, I think the one positive that came out of that, apart from the raised interest, I mean, so many more people have come to this channel recently.
Well, that's right. Yeah.
And I don't know if you've seen the Facebook group that I occasionally post in. I never get the chance to read it properly; it's too busy. But I think that was on about 4,000 before Netflix, and now it's on 11,000. So that's tripled. The numbers have tripled. So I do think it's backfired on the police, perhaps more than I expected, even. But yeah, the one apart from that, the one positive was this letter from Lucy where she's writing to a friend, and you see that she's just trying. She's adapting to life in prison, and she's not in too bad a state. She's able to rationalize things, and she's able to still try and look on the positive. And that's, a good thing, I guess. We just don't want her to get too used to being in prison because she needs to come out of prison. So
I thought that was really heartwarming as well. And I thought it was, again, that gave a personal perspective of her. No, I agree completely. I think the police you've got to remember that the police, I think, I look back at and they actually made this deal with, they put it out to tender to all the different sort of big companies only a few weeks after the end of the first trial. And I think they thought it was going to be a sort of triumphant, we've found the world's worst serial killer of babies, and they thought it was going to be very praiseworthy on them. And of course, in that respect, it's completely backfired, because obviously public sentiment is much more now on Lucy's side. And so, of course, it makes them look like bullies and just thoroughly unpleasant, when so much of it was unnecessary. I mean, of course, Steve Watts on your channel saying that actually there was no need to even arrest her. I mean, there was absolutely no need to arrest her. If she was willing and she'd actually offered to come down to the police station, you only arrest somebody because you need to get them to the police station to interview them and you don't think they'll agree to it. But if somebody will agree to it, so there was certainly no need to arrest her on the first occasion. And then if she was already checking in every 2 weeks to the police station as part of her bail conditions, I can't see any reason why they needed to arrest her on the second or the third occasion, particularly as she would have come down to the police station if she'd been invited and they'd asked. She would have complied completely. So again, it was all horribly dramatic. And again, you wonder whether that was for dramatic effect, that if they were going to be selling the rights to that they needed a really good arrest to put into the documentary, and that in itself is incredibly cynical, isn't it, really?
Yeah. I mean, I always had that feeling, even from seeing the trailer, that I know they routinely capture body cam footage, and that's fair enough, I suppose. But a lot of it did, especially if you listen to the Daily Mail podcast interview with Paul Hughes, where he indicates he'd basically already decided that Lucy was guilty when when they arrested her for the first time, when they still should have had an open mind. But I've spoken a lot about the police already. I'll speak a lot about them again in the future. They're just incompetent. This constabulary are incompetent. They made statements in that Netflix documentary that are embarrassing. Usually, you would say definitely the claim that we had to arrest her would be the most stupid thing that they said. But I don't think it was. I think it was only the third most stupid thing that they said. Because I think the claim that, oh, it's terrible, all the families are having to watch this, that was probably the second most stupid. Maybe that was the most stupid, because there's also, we welcome being challenged. Yeah, we welcome being challenged. that was a good one as well. So I think perhaps the most stupid on reflection was saying, oh, it's terrible, all the families have to watch this. Like as if, I mean, I wonder if they reflected on that at the time. After, I think it was Simon Blackwell that said that. I wonder if after he said that, he thought, hold on a second, the people are only seeing this because we're selling it to Netflix, or we're tendering it to Netflix. But I think they are so stupid and so lacking in self-awareness that they probably didn't even think anything of it. They're just sick, aren't they? Simple as that. So yeah. Obviously,
do you think we could do freedom of information and get information about the tendering process and how much, where they say they weren't paid. They put out a statement to say they weren't paid any money at all, which I find difficult to believe. But I suppose that would be quite interesting, because we found that,
I find that unlikely, don't you?
I think it's very unlikely.
I would just,
very
hey,
unlikely.
Netflix, we'll just give all the footage away. Does that sound like something that they would do? Why on earth would they do that?
But the trouble is, as a public body, what, if they are paid, where does the money go? And what's
I know something fairly confidently, which is that they've commercialized the image that everyone's seen of Lucy, the arrest photograph, because it's on Getty Images. So the police must have sold that to Getty Images. They don't give it away.
Oh, wow.
I'm very doubtful that they gave it away, the footage away. But if they say that they did, then until such time as it's proven, then we have to accept that. But it would fly in the face of all reason, would it not? I mean, why would you give? Why would you get?
They'd have to just, as a public organisation, they would have to justify what they did with the money that they received, wouldn't they? I mean, where it would have to, they would really have to justify exactly what they did with any money they received, either from Netflix or from Getty or from anywhere else. Really, surely they must do.
I don't know. Is anyone? I don't know. I mean, they don't view themselves as publicly accountable. Their conduct has indicated they don't view themselves as publicly accountable. So maybe they just think, well, if anyone asks for information, we just won't send it. I mean, I get so many emails from people. I've written to the police. I've written to the, they just straight bat everything. They just don't respond. They just say, "Oh, we'd have to respond to you. That's it. Thank you for your time." Not even courteously, really. So, in terms of your initial comment about a freedom of information request, I don't know if they would respond, or I don't know if they would respond in the way that we feel that they should. But I don't know. But yeah, overall, I thought it was horrendous. It was. I think the only positive is it's woken a lot of people up.
But it has, and internationally as well. I understand that it's sort of brought more people from abroad to the case, which is good.
Yeah.
And as you say, I mean, it has probably, of all the documentaries that have come out, this is the biggest in terms of exposure worldwide in this country.
Yeah.
So that's good.
Well, back in the day, if you brought a program out on ITV or BBC, it can get enormous numbers. But now Netflix is much bigger, isn't it? So certainly globally, across a global audience. So, the other thing I was going to ask you about before we look at some questions from viewers is that there's this new case of Dr. Evans where he has diagnosed someone who had a brain tumor as being bulimic. So I obviously am not medically qualified, but that doesn't sound like a great prognosis. What do you think about that?
Well, a lot's been made of it, but I can tell you that actually, in real terms, I don't think anything will come of it at all. I don't think it will make any difference whatsoever. Mainly because obviously Dewey is now. I don't think the police will ever use him again, even if they couldn't find anybody else. I don't think they bring him into another trial. So he's basically completely retired now as an expert witness. We have checked up, but he is still licensed with the GMC. He's not licensed to practice, but he is still licensed in terms of that he can do medical work. So when you're licensed with the General Medical Council, you are either licensed to practice, where you can actually see patients, diagnose, manage, prescribe drugs, order investigations. So that's so that you're licensed to practice in that situation. Because he wasn't practicing in 2015 and 2016, he had to get a license to practice for the trial, which was all very, very dodgy. I won't go into great details unless people want me to. But so for a short time, he was licensed to practice again, but he's lost that now. So I mean, the most that could happen, but that sort of thing, although it sounds awful, wouldn't actually be something that GMC would be involved with. That would be a negligence claim if the parents wanted to bring a negligence claim, they could, but that wouldn't reach the threshold of a GMC referral. Right. And if it did, it wouldn't be enough to have him struck off as a doctor or to not be. But he's not practicing, so they wouldn't take it up, because they would only take it up if he was still licensed to practice, because he would be a danger to other patients. But if he's licensed with the GMC but not licensed to practice, nothing really will come of it, I don't think.
Right. My understanding is if this is at the Court of Appeal, we all think it will go to the Court of Appeal. It's basically inevitable. Dr. Evans has to appear, doesn't he, at the Court of Appeal? That was my understanding.
Not if he doesn't want to. I mean, there's two things. I get the impression that the police are absolutely fed up with him and doing all his interviews and being completely and utterly biased and doing everything that no good expert witness would ever do. So I'm not sure. I think relations between him and the police are very, very poor indeed. I mean, he even said in interviews, I keep sending all these reports to the police and I don't hear anything. So I don't think the police have got anything on him. And then I think he has decided that it wouldn't be good for him to go to court again. But that does bring a real difficulty, because of course they would have to, if it went to appeal, they would have to justify the original convictions, and if Dr. Evans doesn't defend the original convictions, they're going to have to find new doctors who will, and they'd have to defend exactly what the original convictions were, and some of those we already know are completely been thrown out. So
rubbish, aren't they? So
I doubt it. I mean, I don't think I don't think he would come back, and I don't think the police want him to come back. So I don't think he would.
Well, it's interesting that. I mean, I always assumed he would be at the Court of Appeal, because otherwise the prosecution is saying, right, we think this is a valid conviction, but the person it all hangs on can't be here. I thought of an analogy then, but it's quite a dated analogy. I don't know if a modern audience would. It's like, do you remember the program 321 that used to be on?
No, I don't. Sorry.
Right, it had Dusty Bin on it. Did that ring?
Oh yeah, Dusty Bin. Okay, yeah.
I was going to say, it's like having 321 without Dusty Bin. a bit of an obscure reference, but not one for the kids. But yeah. Yeah, I mean,
but the trouble is, you see, as an expert witness, he's completely. Before the trial, nobody knew him, and he was a credible expert when he went to the first trial. And I don't think he appeared at all in the second trial, did he? There was no need to, so he didn't appear in the second trial. But since then, he's. I mean, the defence barrister could spend about 4 days going through all his interviews he's done since and just completely and utterly discredit him as an expert. So that's usually how cross-examination starts, is that you discredit your expert and you spend and usually it's quite difficult, because most experts aren't very high profile and it's very difficult to find anything particularly bad about them. But with Dewey Evans, I mean, it'd be incredibly easy. So he'd be discredited before he even started talking about the cases. And so it'd be appalling. Yeah.
I mean, I did. I've got to reread my book a few times. I'm going through a legal read of my book now, which is not fun, but it has to be done. But the last time I reread my book, I read one chapter, and you're just trying to go through it and make it as strong as you can, and you don't usually reflect on, whether it's any good or the chapters. But I did read through one chapter and I just thought, I've just absolutely annihilated him in this chapter. I mean, it's just. And the thing is, he can't say anything, because all it is quoting stuff he said and telling you things that he's done, since the trial finished. So he can't say one word against it. You know, he could put out some kind of generic statement saying, "Oh, a jury agreed with my evidence," or something. You know, the usual crap he comes out with. But he couldn't disagree with anything written in the chapter. It's impossible. And I just thought, it's just an absolute annihilation. And he's made it so easy. He's made it so easy with his own conduct. So yeah, it's pretty incredible. Let me just to finish this discussion. Let me ask you about the actual diagnosis of bulimia when it's actually a brain tumor. Now, I want to be fair as a non-medic. Someone can come into your hospital or surgery or office or whatever it may be with a very wide range of conditions and a very wide range of symptoms, and diagnosis is not easy. So I think we should say that in mitigation. But is this a horrendous blunder, or is it something that is somewhat understandable?
I'd have to know a lot more about the case, and that's. I mean, I do that with any medico-legal thing that I look at. So until I've got, I didn't really even attempt to even address that at all when I looked at the articles and looked at the stuff that's come out this weekend. So I wouldn't really be able to say how he got to bulimia from a brain tumor. I just don't know. So, and you always have to be careful, because so often, and you know, you hear something or you get an impression when you start, and then when you actually get all the stuff, it isn't as it seems. So I'd be cautious, but obviously he clearly made a major mistake. But how he thought it was bulimia when it was a brain tumor, it would be wrong for me to.
Yeah,
I don't want to do a Dewey there. Yeah.
That's absolutely fair. So we'll get in some viewers' questions now. So someone's asked me, would I come to Torquay? What stands in Torquay? It's not my place to decide that. I will say that Torquay is a bit out on a limb, but I would love to come to Devon and Cornwall. I just can't say whether or not that's going to happen at this point. Let's go a bit further down. CCRC, it shows that they recognise public pressure and are defending their call in regards to the pace of their review. Inevitably, it will be a drip feed, and Mark is working for free. So I think fair comments. It's comment here. It's worth reading the Jolly Contrarian's thoughts on waiving privilege. It might be they've requested information from Myers, and that's the date we're seeing, not the actual permission to waive. So I have actually recorded another interview with the Jolly Contrarian that I haven't released yet. So we did discuss waiving privilege in there. So there'll be a little bit of that. Excuse me. My throat's really dry today. What has happened between Lucy and a former barrister, and why did they depart ways? So I guess Jonathan can, I mean, I have my view on this, but maybe Jonathan can elaborate on this.
So I'm not absolutely sure that Ben Myers is not still the case, because Mark McDonald isn't a KC. He's a junior, a senior junior. But I think Ben Myers, we haven't heard anything from at all, and whether he would go to the Court of Appeal. Well, we know that Mark McDonald is not actually going to be running the Court of Appeal case. He said that in Manchester, didn't he? So there'll be another barrister who actually runs the case. I don't have any idea whether Mark McDonald and Ben Myers sort of speak regularly or have any direct communication. I don't know. I doubt it, actually, because so much has happened since. And basically, Mark McDonald's got all his own he got new witnesses and new everything. So I would probably think that they don't have a lot of communication. But you may find that Ben Myers is still officially, because being a KC, he's still officially her main barrister, and obviously Mark McDonald's doing all the work now.
Yeah. So I think, just to add to that, I don't say this disparagingly, but Ben Myers is not going to do work pro bono, realistically. Is that a fair comment,
No.
Jonathan?
I think it's
Yeah.
a very good comment. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's another factor, of course.
Yeah.
Do we know when the Netflix documentary was shot? There was no Brewery or Jairam. So I know that it took a long time because I first heard about it ages ago now. It must have been best part of 2 years before it came out. So I know the police, Cheshire Police, said they went through this tendering process. Netflix said they went through this tendering process with Cheshire Police. But I think it must have been they must have been shooting fairly. I think well before the panel came out. Well, I think probably before the New Yorker article, probably before the Guardian, the Daily Telegraph as well. I think when this was agreed and began, it was probably still when it was the opposition was an internet opposition only, probably. I couldn't say that with total confidence. I don't know why there was no Brewery or Jairam, but for all we know, they may have filmed with Netflix and then later asked for their contribution to be removed, or we don't know.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
I mean, that's definitely possible, but
yeah, I think it's a very good point actually, because I think that the way they were speaking, it does seem that it was probably quite soon after the original convictions, because they just didn't seem to have. They just didn't even seem to be aware of all the stuff that's gone on since. So it may well have been filmed before the panel and before all the real controversies started. So that's a very good point. That's possibly and probably the case, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a question here that I don't know anything about at all. Do you know what? I don't have a clue what this means. Do you know what tiny, tiny, tiny guilt means? Doesn't doubt come before guilt? Guilt is a state of mind that occurs when doubts are non-trivial. I don't understand that question. Sorry. Do you understand?
Well, it's obviously it's obviously Dr. Gibbs's tiny, tiny, tiny doubt from the Netflix documentary.
Right. What did he say?
That's the start of it. Yeah.
So let me explain.
So do you want to read it again?
Yeah. So he said, hold on. What do you know what tiny, tiny, tiny guilt means? Doesn't doubt come before guilt? Guilt is a state of mind that occurs when doubts are non-trivial. So it probably is let me explain something to you, everyone. So when I recorded the review, I knew that I needed to record it for the next day. So the first thing is when I started that review, I just couldn't watch the Netflix at first when it came out at 8:00. I just didn't want to watch it. I had to take my dog out and have some toast and just try and build up to it. So I didn't start till 11:00. I didn't finish till 2:30 in the morning. But as I was going through it, I realized there were so many things I had to pick up on with the police. I didn't pay as much attention to either the Shoe Lee stuff or Gibbs. Gibbs was so I kind of missed the comment you're referring to, and I missed a couple of things out of the review that I could have included. And the simple reason was I didn't want the review to go on for 2.5 hours or be excessively long, and I wanted to take the police to task on everything they said that was wrong, which was basically everything they said. So I kept. I mean, it really was quite a laborious task, and I've never actually watched the documentary as a piece of television. I just had to make notes, pause, make notes, pause, make notes, and so I've never really, and I don't want to watch it again. So I maybe missed out on a couple of comments. So I'm not quite sure what Gibbs said. I know he made this comment about maybe they got the wrong person, but I do wonder if originally they wanted to have Brewery and Jairam in it, and they thought better of it. I don't know.
I think that's probably the case.
What do you think?
No, he just famously said that he'd got that since the trial he had tiny. It was 3 tinies doubt, and obviously the contributors there saying that he's probably got tiny guilt because he knows.
I understand
what the situation is.
What did you think of Gibbs's contribution overall then?
Well, I have to say, I mean, I think well, they're all feeling the heat. I mean, I was only thinking today. I mean, when the verdict came, sort of 2.5 years ago, I bet all of them thought within a few weeks everything would quieten down. Lucy would go to prison for the rest of her life. Everything would move on, and everything would go quiet. And none of them can have ever dreamt it would get like this. And obviously, they're all. And if anything, because I mean, Netflix is absolutely gigantic. The pressure and everything else is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and they must be absolutely ruining the day that they ever did what they did, because it's backfired on the whole prosecution. It's backfired on, and yeah. And of course, Gibbs is now sorry, yeah.
No, you go on. Gibbs is now.
Well, he's now being ordained as a vicar, and so obviously that has implications as well. I mean, so yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, all I was going to say is that they'll never be able to forget this, because I know people are saying they're getting on with their lives, and to some extent that's true. But you know what it's like when you've got something big hanging over your head. You can't. It's always there in the background, and this is a little bit more than just something hanging around in the background. And there's only two possibilities for them. Either it will be hanging around for a very long time to come, or Lucy will be exonerated, in which case they're not just going to be able to walk away. No way. The police will probably get off scot-free. They usually do. Although I think in this case, there'll have to be some investigation into their ability to investigate complex cases. But the police usually do get away scot-free. Brewer and J-Ram are not just going to be able to say, "Oh, sorry, never mind, that was a bit of a cock-up, wasn't it?" They're just not.
Yeah.
They're going to face consequences for sooner or later. So, what those consequences?
How do the police get away with it? Because I mean, so much of the investigation has been so appallingly bad. I mean, surely it is a masterclass in complete ineptitude, and surely. In any other profession, if you did something as badly as Cheshire Police and Operation Hummingbird, it should be scrutinised to the nth degree and lessons learned. But I agree with you. Somehow they will just get away with it, and it's outrageous, really.
I think if anything could lead to an actual, the state grasping the nettle and actually facing the fact that we can't just allow the police to weasel their way out at this time, it could be this. But I think the answer to your question is, it's just the potato is too hot to pick up, because what do you do? What obviously, if you properly examine, inevitably you'll come to the conclusion that Cheshire Police are incompetent. Anyone would come to that conclusion. There is no other possible conclusion. So then, once you've drawn that conclusion, what do you do then? Do you say, right, well, Cheshire Constabulary can't run the policing for Cheshire anymore? What do you actually do? We're just going to sack everyone and bring in an entire new police force? What do you actually do? It's just a very difficult thing to grasp. It's like a lot of things that happen in life and in society. Some things are just too big for humans to face up to, and they can't face up to it.
But I think that's down to Paul Hughes. I mean, Paul Hughes was particular. I mean, he is particularly bad, and I've seen other investigations with other chief police officers or senior police officers who are sort of spearheading and heading up an investigation, and they've done a brilliant job, and they're humble and they're open, and they don't. But in this case, I mean, Paul Hughes must take enormous responsibility, because basically he was heading it up, and it is directly his responsibility why it has all gone so badly. And if somebody else, if it hadn't been Paul Hughes, it had been some good police officer, then clearly it would have all been dealt with properly. And
yes,
so there are personalities who are responsible in this case, which actually explain why it's been such a cock up.
It's incredible when you think about it. But when they had that meeting on the 15th of May, where the paediatricians go to see the police, Lucy's parents had already written to them at that point. So actually in that meeting, what could have happened is, when all the paediatricians were saying this, that, and the other about Lucy, the police could have said, well, it's funny you should say that, because actually we've got an email from Lucy's parents and they say that you've been scapegoating her and bullying her. And we've looked into that and we actually know that she won every point of her grievance against you. So do you have anything to say about that? And I think that meeting may have gone very differently. But
Absolutely.
of course they didn't do that. So I think Paul Hughes could be a sacrificial lamb, but he's supposed to be retired anyway.
Paul Hughes.
He's quite.
Really?
He was getting close to retirement age when Hummingbird started, and he should be retired now. But yeah, I think there's always the possibility of making a sacrificial lamb and saying, "Oh, it's this person's fault." But would there be any real meaningful change where it's actually properly examined how the police investigate cases and why they got it so wrong, and where Cheshire Police? I mean, Stephanie mentioned something that can happen, but whether that would actually happen or not, I don't know. But anyway, my original point was the consultants are not just going to be able to weasel the way out of it. They are going to face consequences. What those consequences will be, I don't know, but they're not going to be able to say, "Oh, we made a mistake, sorry." That's just not going to cut it. So we'll have to wait and see. So there's another question here about the CCRC. So I'll ask for Jonathan's opinion first. Do you think it sounds like the CCRC are annoyed with Mark McDonnell? Sounds like they are annoyed with having the information being handed in like this?
I think it's very clear, and I read it. I read it just as a sort of list of how things. I thought it was a sort of progress report and them reporting what has happened on which date factually. But when I watched this video and saw it in that light, it's very clearly a criticism saying, look, because it actually says report submitted or evidence submitted, and then in brackets next to it it says but no submission submitted, or something along the lines of, well, you put this report in but we couldn't do anything with it until we had a submission. In fact, at one point it says told a submission will come in, and then it says a submission has come in but it's not related to what we were expecting, or something like that. So I think it's a direct criticism to Mark McDonnell, I'm afraid. I mean, I think it's sort of saying, don't blame us that things are not moving very fast, because we haven't been given what we were expecting in a timely fashion in the way we were expecting it. And this is how things have happened, and it's not the way we were expecting. So I think they're being quite critical, I'm afraid.
Okay.
So I think, yeah,
that's fair. I think, I saw it as them defending their position, basically. I don't know about being annoyed. It's hard for me to say, but I thought that I saw it as like an act of self-defense, basically, is how I would see it. So there's another question here that I've already answered pretty much about Jerem and Brary and Evans getting into trouble. So I've addressed the Jerem and Brary aspect of this. Dr. Evans is very vulnerable indeed, because everyone will just stab him in the back if they need to. So he's the most vulnerable person. Of course, he should be, because he's primarily responsible. Even though the police, you could say, are equally responsible because they should investigate properly. But this whole thing is hanging on his work that is just enormous. The most generous thing you could say is that it's enormously substandard. That would be generous, wouldn't it? I mean, I don't see, even to me, I don't know if you look at these documents, Jonathan, where, these initial work he's doing, and it's I mean, I haven't studied anything scientific since my GCSEs, but I know that's not how you go about doing a medical investigation. You don't go, oh, well, this is one way she could have been killed. This is one way this infant could have been killed. This is another way. That's not what you do. You look Absolutely. At the clinical picture and then decide what's the most likely outcome. You don't go through a list of possible murder methods and go, try to rule them out until you've got one left and then go, I reckon it's that. It's an absolute joke.
No,
so yeah, he's very vulnerable. Absolutely.
Well, the reason he's so vulnerable is that absolutely everybody in the case can say, oh, well, I got it wrong because of Dewey. Everyone can blame Dewey. I mean, the barristers, the legal team, the police, because he put himself up as so central to everything. When the SHIT hits the fan, he's the one that everyone can blame. So he's going to be in terrible trouble. He really is going to be in bad trouble.
Yeah. I think the best case scenario for him is if he dies in the next. That get him off the hook. I mean, if he was to just pass away and there's a tennis player called Vitas Gerulaitis who died tragically at a young age, and basically he was staying at some posh house somewhere, his friend's house, and the heater was emitting poisonous gas of some nature. So he slept overnight. It was like the pool heater or something. So he just slept overnight, never woke up, just poisoned in his sleep. That would be the best kind of case scenario for Dodge Evans if the heat went wrong in his house and he just didn't wake up one day. That'd be, because he'd be quiet, just go away quietly. That'd be the best thing that could happen to him from his perspective, because he's going to go through a horrible life experience, but he deserves it. If he wants to know why that's happening, he just needs to look in the mirror.
Exactly.
Let's go a little bit further down. Just looking for a question. Has anyone addressed why the consultants would have been happy for Lucy to work on another unit? Did they honestly believe she would only hurt babies on their ward? It's not something I've specifically addressed, I don't think. It is interesting. A lot of the politics, like, again, this is something Jonathan's a lot more well-versed in than me, but if I went back 5 years, or certainly 3, maybe even 3 years before I started this, I'm not naive about things, and I know in a big organisation it's hierarchical. There can be a lot of politics. I'm not surprised that there can be problems in an organisation like the NHS, but it does seem a lot more, toxic than I would have imagined. And these kind of cultural things, I find hard to understand. But I mean, so at some point, Jonathan, the consultants, will have Lucy taken off the unit, and potentially she would go away somewhere else. Mm-hmm. Is that what do you think that's odd? Or, I mean, it seems a little bit odd.
I suppose it's the path of least resistance, isn't it? I mean, it is well known that poor clinicians do leave one hospital and go to another, and it's well known that they're not very good, but they get jobs elsewhere, and so it does happen. And this is where, because see, whistleblowing is such a difficult problem that if you whistleblow, it works the other way, of course. If you whistleblow on a poor clinician, you can get into a lot of trouble. So I'm afraid it's not unusual that people do just allow poor clinicians to drift between different hospitals, different units, and go unchecked. And the whole heart of the problem of whistleblowing is that in the majority of cases, people don't whistleblow when they should do, and that's the problem. And of course, when people do whistleblow, there can be enormously serious consequences.
Yeah, as we've seen. Hi, Chris. I'm wondering if Michael Hall wasn't called for evidence because he has some doubts, i.e. the insulin. Could Myers have been forward-thinking for a future trial? I'm trying to work out what I can say about this. So I do know a little bit about this now, actually. So I can't tell you everything that I know for legal reasons, but I will have everything that I can tell you in my book when it comes out, because I do happen to know a little bit about this now. One thing I will say is that, ironically, not calling Michael Hall is a good thing for Lucy now, because none of his evidence was used in court, and she didn't have any experts, and that's one of the strongest arguments she's got in her favour. I don't know the full legal picture of this, and we can ask Jonathan about that in a second. But if she'd have called Michael Hall, or if Ben Myers had called Michael Hall, and he'd given evidence, and he almost certainly would have raised some of the points that the panel have raised, then these points would have been raised in a court case by a doctor, and now they haven't. I don't think that was forward thinking for a future trial at all, because Maya's job is to win that trial, but it could have inadvertently helped Lucy. Do you have any kind of thoughts on this, Jonathan?
Yeah, I mean, it's just incredibly complex, as you say. You sort of muddy. If it is in some ways very helpful that nothing has been said and there is a sort of still a clean slate to work on in the future, because as you say, if things could be quoted if he had been called, but then of course it was absolutely devastating that she didn't have a defense expert to at the original trial. I mean, that obviously in itself was a complete catastrophe. So I think you've summed it up pretty well, really. I mean, I'm not sure that I can say any more really than that. And yeah, it's as you say, on the one hand, it leaves a clean slate for the future, but it's very, very sad that, particularly as we now know that essentially the judge said that the jury could only take account of expert evidence, and so if there was no expert evidence, Lucy didn't have a chance, really. Never had a chance.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I mean, in the long run, that may help her, but we'll have to wait and see. So there's a question about Evans at the Court of Appeal. So someone is asking, surely Lucy's defence can insist on cross-examining Evans at the appeal? That's one for you, Jonathan.
Well, not necessarily, because as an expert, you don't have that. You don't actually have to appear. You don't. If I don't think their legal team and the police won't want Evans, and if Evans doesn't actually want to appear, I don't think there's anything that can absolutely force him. I mean, I've been an expert for many years, and you're just instructed, and if the police didn't instruct you, in fact, it would be down to the legal team. They could ask him, but he would have the right to say, I don't want to appear, I think. And then in effect, what would have to happen is that he would have to be confident that his evidence was strong enough that somebody else could defend it for him, which of course they couldn't. So, but no, I don't think you can force an expert against their will to take part in a case. I don't think so.
Okay, well, that's interesting. I didn't know that. I must say that my impression of what would happen in the Court of Appeal is completely wrong, because I thought he would definitely have to come in. Because the whole case hangs on him. I mean, he didn't give evidence for Child K. It doesn't really matter in the Inchilling cases, but everything else is him in the whole case.
Yeah.
Well, what kind of expert, Jonathan, is going to come in and say, oh yeah, I think Child E, where Child E lost at least 25% of his blood, died due to the injection of air into. I mean, who the hell's going to defend that?
Well, absolutely nobody, but nobody will defend it anyway. I mean, he might want to. If the lawyers instructed him and he wanted to come back, then no doubt he would come back. I'm just wondering whether, just because he was the chief prosecutor in the original case, then, because of course it'll be what the evidence was in 2022-23. It won't get back to the Court of Appeal for 5 years on. I mean, I've been in situations where I've been in cases where experts, in fact, today I was dealing with one where the defendant, the doctor who's been accused of negligence, has since died. Nothing to do with the legal process, but he's died, and so therefore we're having to deal with it. So it can be a very difficult situation, but in that situation we just have to work around it. And of course, I've also had situations where experts have died in the course of a case, and therefore you have to then go right back and start all over again.
Yeah, interesting. So someone commenting here about the audio version of my book and wanting to listen to it. So just clarify, while I've got the chance, that the paperback, hardback audio and ebook will come out on the same day, on the 9th of July, and I've got to go to London and record the audiobook in probably in May. So you go to a recording studio. I mean, hopefully they're going to hold my hand and tell me what to do. It's like it's a little bit. It's not something I've done before, needless to say, but yeah, I'm sure it'll be fine.
You'll be brilliant. You'll be brilliant. I can assure you.
I'll do my best. Yeah, so yeah, it's definitely coming out. I mean, I think the audiobook's really important, so we're going to do the best job we possibly can on it for sure.
So what did you get? Do you get the audiobook? Can you get it as a DVD, or I mean, how would it be marketed as an audiobook?
Well, typically now they're downloaded on so like Audible, maybe it might be on, or it might be on Spot. I don't know, but they'll be mostly be downloads. Is how it's done. So if you bought it on Amazon, I haven't bought an audiobook previously, I don't think, but yeah, you just get a download link and then you can download it. Whether you can, I presume you can download it as a file onto your computer as well. I don't know, but that's how it works basically. How long realistically do you think a retrial will take place? So I think you mean when, firstly. So we can't give a precise answer to this question. It depends on when the CCRC refers. It depends on what the Court of Appeal does, and then it depends on if there is a retrial. It depends on the gap between the retrial and the case appearing in court. Now, this can actually be quite a long period of time, but I would suggest that if the Court of Appeal orders a retrial, that it will happen quite quickly, because I think there will be political pressure, and in some cases there can be an enormous gap. There was an enormous gap in this case between Lucy being arrested and the case going to court, nearly 2 years. I don't see that happening in a retrial because they've already got big names speaking out now. So imagine what it's going to be like if they decide this isn't a safe conviction, we need to have a retrial. So I really think everything will be done systemically behind the scenes to make sure it happens quickly. So with that being said, I think 2028 or 2029, but maybe 2028 is possible. But I mean, that really is a stab in the dark. I mean, we don't know. We don't know how long any of these processes will take. What do you think, Jonathan?
No, I agree. I think it's going to be, if it does happen. But I think the other thing to discuss is Thirwall, because there's been, I don't know about you, but there's been some very, our group has been sending out some stuff that keeps coming. So in the last few weeks and months, Thirwall has kept publishing some very odd things on the website. The one came up today, which was Lucy's manager, nursing manager,
isn't it?
Karen. So a letter, an email that she sent about Dr. Breary came up on the Thirwall inquiry website today. So it's very strange, and we're wondering why the Thirwall inquiry are sort of publishing these things and what the background is really. And we're just wondering whether there is some concern that if this is a miscarriage of justice, the Thirwall inquiry will. I don't know whether the Thirwall inquiry there must be a reason why they're just publishing these quite strange, you would think not very helpful things to an inquiry which is meant to show is working around the fact that she's guilty. So
yes.
I think the Thirwall inquiry, I think the Thirwall inquiry is going to be very pivotal, because whatever that does will, I think, be very, very important for the future, because I'm the fact that there's been delays already, and if it's going to eventually have to say something, and if I think they are increasing because they've uncovered so much, and it is in fact much of what they've said has sort of supported the fact of Lucy's innocence. But I think that's the first thing. We're going to have to see what the Thirwall inquiry does, because I think everything will sort of come from that, really. And if they don't do anything, if they just keep delaying it, then that in itself will be quite important. But something's going to happen with the Thirwall inquiry. They're going to have to do something eventually.
Well, I'm just reading this ITV article just as a reminder to people. So the latest update issued on the Thirwall inquiry website. This article's Thursday, the 11th of November last year. The inquiry is written to core participants with an update on the timetable for the final report. Work on the report is ongoing and publication is scheduled for after Easter 2026. A further update on the timetable will be provided at the end of February 2026. So they've got 11 days to provide that further timetable, whatever that means, because it's 17th of February today. So they're supposed to provide it by the 28th at the latest. So we'll know by then whether they're on time or not and what's going to happen. Well, we may not know what's going to happen next because they might delay it again. But
But if they delay it again, what they can't keep delaying it forever, and then they've got to take a stance, haven't they?
Yeah, but equally they can't. Surely they can't come out and say, if you follow the Thirwall inquiry closely, the whole agenda of the Thirwall inquiry was blaming hospital management for what happened and blaming hospital management for not referring this to the police quickly enough. That position is not tenable now. So the recommendations should naturally emerge or emanate from the public process. That's what the whole point of having a public process is. So if they were to make recommendations based on that public process today, one of the recommendations, for example, would be as soon as you see even a slight suspicion of a spike in deaths, you should refer it to the police. Now, for them to come out and say that now would be almost ludicrous, or probably literally ludicrous. So how could they do that?
But if she had something about her, she has the opportunity to make something absolutely brilliant and saying we should get rid of adversarial criminal cases in complex medical cases, and we should go to a judicial or inquisitorial process. And I mean, she has the opportunity to completely transform the way criminal cases and the way you deal with a suspected. And you wouldn't even really need to. I said this the last time we were on. You wouldn't even need to actually talk about Lucy Letby. You could just talk generally about how in the future this must be done. But I don't know if that's in her remit or how closely whether she's willing to deviate some distance from her remit and do something completely different and something very constructive. But I agree with you completely. I mean, it is absolutely absurd from the situation we've been through to say, you know, if you've got any concerns at all, call the police in, because the police are the last people. They should, whatever happens, we've got to have a situation where proper, highly qualified, a panel or a group of clinicians look at the situation before and they decide whether it goes to the police or not. It can never happen like this ever again. It mustn't.
So I just want to remind people, because I was actually updating this in my book today, that there's still a nurse in Birmingham who's been under suspicion for 3.5 years, who hasn't been. I don't know how you describe it when the police say, "Oh, we're not investigating her anymore," but they haven't said that. It's supposed to be in relation to the poisoning of one infant. She's been under investigation for it's 3.5 years now. The police still say, "Oh, she's still under investigation," but she's been released on bail. I mean, it has all the hallmarks of another Lucy Letby case, really. And you know, I think it's scary that they would make recommendations to say, "Oh yeah, just refer things to the police more quickly." I mean, I've very little faith in the police at this point. And I know all constabularies are different. We should remember that. But it seems to me that Birmingham are just following a similar path to Cheshire or Chester. It's Cheshire, isn't it? I don't know. But we'll just have to wait and see what Thirwall does. I think whatever they do, that she's in an almost impossible position now, and we'll just have to wait and see what happens at the end of February. But I mean, for example, in my book, there'll be references, or the references are going to be published online to save space, basically. So there might be 1,000 references in the book to documents, reports, articles, etc. And I would say maybe 1/3 of those, somewhere between a third and a half, are references to documents in the Thirwall inquiry. And obviously, virtually every single one of these references is either things that are good for Lucy, or things that exonerate Lucy, or things that are bad for the hospital, etc., etc. So, it becomes almost impossible for them to report back and just say everything was fine at the hospital, apart from the fact that the administrators should have phoned the police in a year earlier, which arguably they should have done. I don't think that was the right course of action, personally, but when the Dr. Salady writes to the consultants and say we should go to the police now ourselves, and we should be willing to be named as suspects, objectively that's what should have happened. Or if they felt so strongly about it, they should have gone to the police themselves. But they wanted to go to the police while taking the least amount of risk themselves, in my view. So, yeah, I find it very hard to predict what Thirwall will do next. I just don't have any idea. Just have to wait and see. Let's see some more questions. Do you think the CCRC announcement pushes the timeline back by a year, given the last submission was in December, or could they have already reviewed the earlier submissions?
The first submission was in May, according to them, and the second one was in October, and then the last one was in January. So I think, I suppose that's the other thing they're saying is, look, the more submissions we have, the more time it's going to take for us to work through the submissions. So if these submissions keep coming, please don't expect us to reach a conclusion quickly. I suppose what they'd like is to make sure that all the submissions come in and all the evidence comes in, and then they can just. But if things are coming in dribs and drabs and they don't know what's going to come in next, because obviously there's the obstetric evidence which is being prepared at the moment, and that is important. That's very important. But again, they'll probably say, if you keep sending us stuff, we can't do anything until we've looked at it. So yeah, that's going to push it back.
Do you think they will have looked at what they've received already, or should they have looked at what they received already?
Well, I hope so. I mean, obviously, what came in May, I hope they've looked at. I think that's probably what Mark McDonald, with all his files, sort of personally presenting it, that was what came in May. But then there hasn't been any after May until October, and then the latest was in January. So obviously that's only last month. So they're going to have to work through all that. So yeah, I think they're implying that because there's only been recent submissions, they're going to have to spend time looking at them before they can do anything with it.
Yeah, fair comment. So someone's asked me about Gibbs' interview for Netflix being before or after Shuley's press conference. I suspect that it was before, but I don't. Obviously, it's impossible for me to say. But I suspect they interviewed him before that, but we don't really know. It did. Correct me if I'm wrong, but he was wearing the same blue shirt in the same setting all the way through. Is that correct? I think that's correct. So it looked like.
I think so.
I think it looked like it was all filmed at the same time.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So with that in mind, I think it was probably before. Probably because I think this. But we don't. I mean, that's an absolute. I mean, don't quote me on that because I have no idea. It's impossible to say. But I think it was probably before. I think they probably went to Brewer and J-Ram and they said no, or as I said, maybe they did interview them and then it ended up on the cutting room floor for one reason or another, possibly. So here's another question: how can police officers investigate medical issues when none of them are trained on medical issues? So the answer to this question, as I've learnt from speaking to Steve Watts, is that there's a protocol for investigating complex cases, or in fact, just any police investigation, really. There's a protocol that they're supposed to follow, and it just so happened that the police didn't follow it. So they obviously can't investigate the medical aspects of the case themselves, but there's a policy and procedure that they're supposed to follow that's supposed to guide them in these type of cases, where there's information that's outside their intellectual understanding. So that should.
But if you got Dowie Evans as because surely any medical evidence would go through Dowie Evans. So how would they apply the protocol to, let's say, Dowie? How does it actually work? Just out of interest, or did Steve not tell you exactly how it works?
No, I mean to be fair, he's given me loads of documents, but I mean I just cannot read them all. It's just because he wrote a lot of he wrote procedure and policy and procedure and stuff. So it's all written down what they should and shouldn't do. So basically, there wouldn't be a specific policy. Like what do you do if some chancer from Wales sends you a random email and then there wouldn't be that, but there would be clear guidance on how you deal with selecting an expert. And basically, because the National Crime Agency said to them, the National Crime Agency said two things. The first thing they said is you need to have a multidisciplinary panel with these experts in, and they named the specific types of experts. That's the first thing. And then secondly, they did actually note, to be fair, at one stage that they needed an active pediatrician. I mean, even that would have been an active neonatologist, but they needed someone who was actively practicing medicine. And they knew that, and they recognized that, but for some reason they just didn't do it. There is no good explanation, or there is no acceptable explanation for why they didn't. It's just impossible to give an answer to that. They just screwed up, really. What else can I say? But there is very clear guidance on what they're supposed to do in those circumstances, and that it was that they should have been able to do it anyway. But given the National Crime Agency had specifically told them what to do, it's just hard. You can't understand how they managed to ignore that and just allow Dr. Evans to do it on his own. But obviously, I would suggest, due to simply a lack of intellectual ability, they couldn't understand that what they were doing was wrong. Dr. Evans, spun a good yarn for them, and they probably got a bit caught up in the investigation, a bit excited about it all, and they, for whatever reason, they couldn't understand that.
But was it more fundamental than that? Didn't jury actually say to them? They said, "Oh, I think we need a big panel to deal with this," and he said, "Oh, no, you don't need a panel. I can deal with it all." And then they said, "Oh, well, that's good. If you can deal with it all, that's brilliant." I mean, that's my understanding of how simple it was. That they might have been aware of the guidance, but when they asked jury about it, he just said, "Oh, no, don't worry about that. We can manage without a panel. We don't need a panel. I'll do it all."
That's absolutely correct, but they shouldn't do that. Obviously, they shouldn't. I mean, this guy has a vested interest to be there, obviously. But leaving that issue aside, once they've received guidance from the national, they shouldn't even be asking for his opinion. They shouldn't even be asking for his opinion at all. So I don't know what the hell they were doing. But maybe they just couldn't understand. They're too ignorant to understand that having Evans go through the notes and then kind of say, "Oh, why don't you give my notes to this person and get them to look at it?" Maybe they're not bright enough to understand that's not an acceptable process. To me, it seems blindingly obvious, but they may just not properly understand it. So there's a question about Paul Hughes here, about him not looking old enough. So what I'd say to that is, remember, police officers can retire at an earlier age than others. So he does actually, to be fair to him, well, look, I think he does look younger than what his possible age is. But also, I just happen to know that he was Someone told me that he was on the verge of retirement. So someone else could have run this investigation, but he decided to do it, or he was asked to do it. So wasn't a more senior officer in that meeting, and yes, police officers retire early on a lovely pension, so as I just mentioned. So says Nigel Wenham and Paul Hughes, I believe. So with a Nigel Wenham senior to Paul Hughes, I couldn't really comment. But there was another officer. I thought, Paul Hughes led the investigation, but whether he had seniority over Nigel Wenham, I don't know. I'll have to ask Stephanie sometime. So someone's asked me about the chapters in the book, so I'm not going to reveal the names of the chapters at this point. Sorry. You will have to wait for the book for that. Also, I can't remember them. So, but I'm not going to reveal them at this time. Even
how long is the book? Is it about 400 pages? Did I see on the
Yeah. Oh, wow. So my aim always was to make the book about the length of Judith Moritz and Jonathan Coffey's book, and ideally a little bit shorter. So it will be in the ballpark of, I believe their first edition was 450, so it will be in the region of that, but without so many wasted pages of reflecting on stuff that doesn't matter, or Judith giving a commentary on what the weather was like in Manchester when she was at court, stuff like that. It's just pure evidence and pure discussion of the case and the hospital and the police. So yeah, it's about 400. Let's go a bit further down because I've answered that question. Does anyone know how the CCRC chose which cases to expedite? They did it with Ched Evans and someone else, so I don't know. They need to hurry up with Letby case. So do you know? I don't think anyone will, who, unless they work for the CCRC, will know this. But do you have any kind of reflection on that?
I've no idea. I've no idea at all, I'm afraid.
So I think I can say that if something is this big politically, they will expedite it. It's as simple as that, But I know a lot of people think it's slow, but actually they are responding more quickly than they often do, and I'm certain this case will be a priority. It's just that the legal system is slow. So let's go a bit further down. You should invite Dewi Evans over for dinner and ask him to confess to his sins. Well, I have written to him. He didn't answer me. He's yet to answer anything I've said. When my book is finished and before it's published, he will receive everything that's written about him and he will have the right to reply. So we'll see if he says anything at all. He hasn't answered my emails. I don't know why, because he's answered other people, but he hasn't answered me. I know he's entered into dialogue with other people, but not with myself. So don't know why. Obviously, he thinks I'm going to have no. I suspect he just thinks I don't know who he is. I don't care who he is. That's fair enough. But we'll see. Have you covered the mental health motive, Chris? This is a girl with no dark triad of conditions, no personality disorder, no psychosis or Munchausen's. Chances must be so slim. Yes, I have covered the mental health aspect. That is, in fact, the first chapter of the book. I don't spend too much time talking about Lucy as a person because I think that plagued the previous book I've discussed. Too much speculation, too much. I did mention this in Hereford. One of the things about Judith's book and Jonathan Coffey's book is they basically meet someone and then they just make that into a chapter. So they meet Dewi Evans, they just make that into a chapter. They meet Michael Hall, they just make that into a chapter. So what they did right at the start was they met Lucy's friends from childhood and people that knew Lucy in childhood and then people that knew Lucy at university. And then everyone just says, well, she was perfectly normal. There's absolutely nothing unusual about her whatsoever. But then that's not a chapter. I mean, that should not be a chapter in a book. It's tedious. So I didn't want to spend too much time, talking about Lucy's personality and Lucy's character because it doesn't exonerate her. But it is important to establish that exactly what you've described here. There's no what are sometimes described as criminogenic factors. There's no evidence of any dark personality or interests. It doesn't make any sense. So yeah, I did cover that in some depth. Someone said, with respect, could I ask who is Christopher Morris? Well, I can't really answer. I can't really answer that question because I'm not anyone of any real significance. I mean, I'm just a writer. I've been a writer for a long time, and I became interested in Lucy's case. And at a certain point in time, I realized that I should write a book on this. The climate was kind of coming into view where it would be sellable and where it would be printable and publishable. And that's it, really. There's nothing else to say other than I've studied this case a lot, and then I started doing YouTube, and that was an accident, and it's been a happy accident because it worked out really well. But I will say there's a preface in the book where I briefly discuss myself because I was asked to do that. Originally, there was no discussion of myself at all because I'm not interested in discussing myself. But the publisher did say it would be a good way to begin, just to explain why you're doing this and who you are to some extent. So I did a little bit of that, but I hope that answers your question. There isn't too much to say, really. Let's go a bit further down. So I'll tell people something. I did put this in the comments because a lot of people asking about the book. So when it went on Amazon, in that day when I announced it on YouTube, it got to, I think it was 745th of all books on Amazon. So it was ranked 745, which for a pre-order book that's not coming out for 5 months is really good. To be, when you think of I don't know how many books there are on Amazon at any given time, but it was in the top 750 5 months before it was released. There's no audiobooks, no ebook, just on pre-orders. So that was a very encouraging sign. So what I need now is for people to review it when it comes out, and then that will help it algorithmically and give social proof. And yeah, obviously the aim is to make it as big as we possibly can, and everything will be done to make that happen. And I want to make it international and make it American. I want it to sell in America and Australia and Canada in particular. So everything will be done to help that. And I guess I'll be doing a lot of stuff this year. But that was a good early sign anyway. Can Lucy have hobbies in prison? Some hobbies are amazing for mental health, and I would love for her to have access if possible. So I know a little bit about this. I don't know if Jonathan knows any more about this than me, but do you want to comment about this, Jonathan, firstly, and then I'll say what
will you go first, and then I'll say anything I know of what you say. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I know that prisoners are allowed some rudimentary things in their cell. So they're allowed music, they're allowed a TV. I think they're allowed a PlayStation 2 or something. To be honest, I'd be really happy with that. if you gave me like a PlayStation, TV, music, and the ability to read and write, I'd be perfectly fine. You'd never see me outside of my cell. I'd go out for an hour's walk once a day. The main thing that bothered me was I wouldn't be able to see my dog, and I wouldn't get very good food. I'd try if I was in solitary, I'd probably stay away from the prison population completely. But I think in terms of hobbies, you'd be quite limited because, for example, my hobby is playing chess. And I know there's a lot of programs in prisons for people playing chess. I know David Howell, who, if you saw, there was a BBC series about chess recently with a woman who does Bake Off. And the grandmaster they had on that program was David Howell. And I know David Howell does stuff with prisons. So I think there is some scope, but that's all I know. What do you know, Jonathan? Do you know anything else?
Well, the other thing we know is she has some jobs, and we're pretty reliably informed that she's a librarian. And apparently that's one of the top jobs in Bronzefield. So I think she is responsible for sort of looking after the library. And I think she does a couple of other jobs. Otherwise, yeah, I mean, you'd have to have hobbies basically in your cell, really. I mean, it's quite limited how much hobbies you could have with other prisoners and on a regular basis. So, yeah, I mean, but yeah, I think we know that she works in the library and she sort of has responsibilities for that, which very few other prisoners do.
Yeah, I think there was some. Wasn't there an article that said she plays games with some of the other prisoners or something?
Yeah,
So
I think so. But
so maybe she plays some board games or something. I don't know. The thing is, chess is a really bad hobby to have, to be honest, because if you're quite a good player, it's pointless playing people that can't play. It's such a but
yeah.
because they can't compete with you. So it's a really you're better off playing Snakes and Ladders or Ludo or something. It's not a very good game unless you've got relatively equal players. Does Lucy Letby see her parents while she's in prison? So obviously we don't have specific information about this, but yeah, I think I mean I have heard something about this, but as this was speculative, I wouldn't like to say for sure. But I mean it's safe to say she's seeing her parents. Yeah, I don't know how often, but yeah, she will be, I'm sure.
There was a recent article saying, yeah, that. But anyway, yeah. I don't. Yeah, I don't know. There was quite a detailed article about this, but
okay,
again, I don't know the reliable. Well, I suppose unless I don't know that it's true. So, but it came out about 2 weeks ago. So yeah, it gave more information about her than we'd ever known before, actually. So, yeah.
What did it say? Did I read that? I can't remember if I did.
Well, it said her mum's had hip problems, so her mum hasn't been able to come to the prison, but otherwise her dad comes on a regular basis, and before then they never. She's also because she gets visits than other prisoners as well, because she's going to be lifelong. So yeah.
Okay, I didn't think I read that. I'll have to find that article. Can the Thirwall inquiry impose another appeal for the case to be reviewed? They don't have the legal right to refer for the case for appeal. According to the terms of reference, they have a relatively limited mandate. I don't think Lady Thirwall is going to say, you know, she'll be a compliant system serving person. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been selected. And she's not going to say, I think this case should go to appeal. So that's just not going to happen. Do you have any thoughts on that, Jonathan?
I think you're right, but I do think she's got an opportunity to, because so much unexpected stuff has come out through Thirwall. Thirwall's in many ways, like everything else, has sort of backfired a bit and has brought to the fore so much. She could, without breaching the terms of her mandate, her report could be very interesting and could be, but I don't know. It all depends how brave she's willing to be. I mean, she could certainly give recommendations which would be very helpful, I think. But it all depends whether she's brave enough to imply that from the evidence that she's heard, she feels there is strong evidence that Lucy is not guilty. But I agree with you. Being somebody who's so established, I don't know whether she would do that, but there is an opportunity for her to do that, and that would in itself be very helpful for any court of appeal. But that's why I think the findings of Thirwall will have some bearing and some implication to the appeal that she's making, and it could be very helpful, I think.
Yeah, interesting.
Do you think? I mean, but there is opportunity, isn't there? That from because what's come up has been so different to what we were expecting and what she was expecting. And if she can actually interpret that and make some conclusions from the evidence that's come up. Firstly, it could be very much more helpful than what we expected her findings to be. But secondly, I think it will imply that Lucy is innocent, I think.
Well, it's interesting these documents have come out, as you mentioned. I just wouldn't like to make any predictions about Thirwall because I just don't know what they're going to do. I mean, I have no idea. I don't. Obviously, eventually, when Lucy's exonerated, hopefully sooner rather than later, there will have to be another inquiry, a proper inquiry, and there'll have to be an inquiry into the inquiry. So, Lady Thirwall's in a very difficult position. I wouldn't like to say what's going to happen. I think it's incredibly difficult to predict, really. We just have to wait and see.
I mean, none of us can say what she's going to do, but I mean, my letter to her, or my letter to the inquiry, did say, please, but effectively, look, there is an opportunity here for you to do something better. But yeah.
I mean, I've read that letter, as you know, and I thought it was a great letter. I mean, you couldn't have made it any clearer, the situation, and whether they would respond to that, whether she herself would see that, we don't know. But you couldn't read that letter and be under any illusions about what the situation is. That's for sure. Not that they should be under any illusions anyway. But yeah, we'll just again.
That's why I waited till now, because I imagine the way these inquiries work. I mentioned she's got, because it's still open, although not open officially to submissions. But I imagine every week the number of letters and the number of correspondence now is a tiny fraction of what it was when it was officially open. So there's that's why I thought, if I'm going to write now, when there's very much less coming in, and maybe once a week she looks at what's come in and somebody says, oh, here's a letter that came in, would you be interested in reading it? So I thought if she's ever going to see it, she'd be more likely to see it now than if I'd sent it at the time when things were at their busiest.
Yeah, that seems quite sensible. So Jonathan, have you read the book written by Judith and Jonathan?
I have. In fact, last Christmas, I spent between Christmas and New Year, and I'm not a very good book reader, but I did read it from cover to cover. In fact, I read it not in order, actually. I read the things I was most interested in first. Okay, so is there a follow-up question?
There is. Yeah. You can probably guess what the follow-up question is. What's your opinion on that book?
Oh, I don't know. I just don't like. I just don't find Judith Moritz and Jonathan Coffey very inspiring, and I think they try too hard to be balanced, and certainly in the panorama they came completely a cropper, because some of the stuff they said really just didn't make sense at all. So I mean, I don't know. People have been a bit harsh on the book, and they certainly, there are good parts to it, and I enjoyed some of it, and they tried very hard. But yeah, it's interesting, because I since the last panorama, there doesn't seem to be any indication that either of them are sort of particularly active now with Lucy Letby. I don't know whether that they sort of.
I think their attitude is, let's park that one and move on. Is probably what they're thinking, I'd imagine. Yeah. Which is probably sensible for them, to be honest, considering the panorama. The last one they made was not well received, deservedly so. So I'll just give my opinion. Well, I think that the first thing is, there's a few things I'll say about it from a writing perspective. So the first thing is, there's far too much stuff in it that is just irrelevant or not of any real interest. No one really needs to hear about what it was like going to court every day, or I bumped into Lucy's parents but they didn't want to speak to me, or what the buildings were like around, and there's some kind of flowery attempt at flowery prose, which to me is just really inappropriate. I just don't think that is the right tone. Firstly, as I mentioned as well, I think this thing of, oh, we met this person, here's a chapter about this person. Oh no, we met this person, here's a chapter about that person, is quite lazy, really, in my view. In my book, even though it's much more difficult to do this and takes much more time, I've woven opinions from people all the way through. So people will appear at the start and they'll also appear later on when it's relevant. I didn't just say, right, I've met this person, here's a chapter from this person, then I'll move on to the next one. Of course, there are some chapters where people of particular relevance appear prominently, but I made sure that it's not structured in that way. It's structured as a narrative, and the narrative runs from the start of the book to the finish, and opinion and expertise is woven into that narrative, which in my view is the right way to go about something like this. Whereas for Judith seemed to think the story was her appearing in court, which for me is not a story at all, and definitely not a story of any interest. So yeah, and obviously I think it's fair to say Judith came down fairly strongly on the side of guilt early on, and then she has to kind of extricate herself from that position credibly, and I just don't think they have the ability to do that. And they don't have the guts to say we were wrong. So overall, I don't rate it very highly, but I think Jonathan makes some fair points. I think there is some good stuff in it as well, and it has raised awareness of the case, and it did keep the case in the public eye, so it's not all bad. But I think those are.
I suppose it's good. The public wants a human perspective, and the fact it talked about Lucy and some of the sort of interaction she had with her friends and all that sort of thing. I suppose it's quite good to have in that, as you say at the beginning, to have something that kept people interested and got people interested in the first place. So in that sense, it was quite useful. But as an analysis, I completely agree. It completely fails, and in that sense, your book's going to be fantastic.
Well, it's not for me to say, but I certainly can say it's the best that I can do. So if it's no good, then I'll be a bit disappointed. But yeah, I mean, the publisher's been very complimentary. Everyone that's seen it's been so. So I'm looking forward for people to read it. Obviously, it might seem a long way away now, but it'll soon come round, because it's not that long ago that I was saying it's 6 to 7 months till it comes out, and now it's already 4.5 months, and it'll soon come round, the way life is, and with things happening with this case. So yeah, obviously I'm looking forward to it. So here's a question for you, Jonathan. If we had an inquisitorial system in this country, do you think this case would have gone to court?
Absolutely not. No. So the whole point, I hope, in an inquisitorial system will be that a good panel of people will look at the case in detail first, and essentially, as with all court cases, you have expert evidence, and it only goes to court if there are major questions which can't be resolved. But hopefully in an inquisitorial system, that's much less likely, because between a group of experienced and capable experts, you can reach the conclusions much more quickly. In many ways, the adversarial system is just completely useless, because it sort of just puts both sides against each other, and you have to start introducing things which to win the case. I mean, it shouldn't be a matter of winning, it should be finding the truth. That's what it's all about.
Yeah,
and that's the other reason. I mean, I'm so critical of Nicholas Johnson, because the way he went about the case, I think your first duty is to the court, and it's not even to your client, it's to the court, and that you present truth, and you cannot present stuff which eventually is found to be untrue and unreliable and false, in order to win your case, because it's so short-sighted. You might win a case, but then you then get into this, and eventually she's exonerated, and you just don't. You just want the truth, and an inquisitorial system will do that. The adversarial system just delivers completely the opposite, and that we must get away from that as quickly as we can. And if something good can come away from this, if we could, for very complex medical cases, if we could get rid of the jury system and an adversarial system, that would be the very best we could possibly achieve, I think.
Yeah, I can't add much to that. All I can really say is that this has been eye-opening for me, as someone who, stupidly 3 years ago, I used to think, oh, if you wanted to put someone away for murder, you'd need some tangible evidence. I don't know why I thought that, but I used to believe that 3 years ago. And it has been an eye-opener for me. Obviously, I've never examined a court case in this sort of depth before as to what goes on. And I think one of the things that was particularly noticeable to me is not just what Nick Johnson does and not just what happens in court, but the fact that no one raises an eyebrow. So no one's looking. Yeah. There's no like objections, or there's no court reports going, "Wow, this is extraordinary. I've never encountered anything like this before." Or, everyone it's just like, right, here's the process. All right, the jury's found guilty. Oh well, never mind. Off you go. Right, thanks. There's no. It's not treated as something extraordinary or even out of the ordinary or unusual. Despite
But do you think that's down to Judge Goss? I mean, do you think Judge Goss was particularly poor and pathetic? Because essentially the judge should be in control of it all. And one of the things he didn't seem to at all do, some judges in court will really, any time the barristers step out of line, they will jump in straight away and say, no, you can't say that, and be much more directional. It seems to me that Judge Goss just sort of sat there and I mean, you've seen the transcripts more than me, but he didn't seem to intervene very much at all. And when he did, it was all very pathetic and sort of lukewarm. He didn't seem to have authority, and they didn't seem to be sort of respectful of him. I don't know about Ben Myers, but certainly Johnson didn't seem to.
So the first thing I will say, what I remember, is that he should have thrown Evans out the case. There's simply no reason not to do that when he had the information he had at his fingertips. He should have been gone. That's the first thing. Secondly, the only kind of strong intervention I can remember from him is when Dewi Evans starts talking his usual crap about, oh, at the start of the investigation, I never knew the name Letby, blah, blah, blah. And then he goes, Judge Goss kind of comes in and says, you've not been asked about this. We've heard this before. I mean, I found that such a indicative of such a guilty conscience. The idea that he's been asked a question and he starts ranting on about, I never knew Lucy Letby. I never knew about, he's not even been asked about that. That to me was very telling about Dr. Evans. And I mean, I genuinely hope he gets his comeuppance. I mean, as much as I want Lucy to be exonerated and as much as I want the system to change, it's as important to me that Dr. Evans is made to face the consequence of his actions. And, it'll only be justice for me if he faces justice in some meaningful way. And more than Roy Meadow, not because Roy Meadow was disgraced, discredited, all this, but he didn't really face any. At the end of the day, what really happened to him apart from his reputation went down the Swanee? Nothing really. So I think he should face worse consequences, because what he has done is worse, in my view, than Roy Meadow. Because Roy Meadow did one very small, narrow thing. Yes, it was completely indefensible and wrong, but Evans has done a whole laundry list of indefensible things, and he, in my view, he very clearly set out with the intention of gaining a prosecution. That's obviously not his job, and he should pay the price for that. But yeah, to return to Judge Goss. I mean, for me, speaking as a non-legal person, when you're in court and you see them going on about the pajamas, which we now know ironically is not even true, you just let it all happen. I don't know whether a judge would usually intervene, but very obviously it's of no value to the court and of no value to the jury as to whether or not Lucy was wearing pajamas when she was arrested. And it was not an important component of her story.
Yeah.
So
but it was just allowing a complete character assassination was really what was so awful, because in a murder trial you should be looking at the mechanism of potential murder, and everything should be around that, and spending vast amounts of time literally character assassinating the potential defendant. It doesn't actually change anything, because unless you've got clear evidence of murder and that she was responsible, then what her personality is like is irrelevant anyway.
Absolutely. Everything we know about Lucy indicates that she's, I mean, I described her as almost implausibly squeaky clean. But the fact is she could be a terrible person, but it doesn't, so what? I mean, I've met a lot of terrible people in my life, and a lot of people I disliked, and a lot of indifferent people, but I don't suspect any of them committed murder. I mean, maybe some of them have, but it has nothing to do with the allegations. That's why the handover sheets are a particular bugbear of mine, because people go on and on and on about them. It's nothing to do with the case. It's nothing to do with the allegations. It's irrelevant. The absolute worst, it's unprofessional. That's the worst thing you could possibly say about it. It's got nothing to do with the court case. Nothing. And yet people go on about it all the time. And stuff like that shouldn't really be brought up, because it's like, what does this does this tell us what happened in the hospital? No. Does this give us any insight into it at all? No. Does it provide an item of meaningful evidence to help us better understand that? No. Shouldn't be in the court case then. So yeah, that's how I feel about it, I guess. So there's a question here about juries, and efforts being made to reduce at this point in time, just reduce, but obviously some people believe that maybe jury trials could be scrapped completely. So what's your view on juries, Jonathan, at this point in time, and how do you feel about jury trials?
Well, I'm amazed that people like Peter Hitchens defend them so much. I mean, the main difficulty with a jury trial is that the jury are completely unaccountable afterwards. I mean, the beauty of a judicial trial is that they've got to write up a very, very detailed judgment, which they've got to be able to back up, and they've got to be able to defend. And the difficulty with a jury trial is obviously what goes on in the jury room is completely private, is never discussed further, and you just have no idea of the quality of of the discussion, or how they reach their verdict, or whether they've even followed the guidance. They might be given very detailed instructions, but there's nothing to say that they've actually followed them.
Yeah, well,
I mean, I've got an amazing story. My brother.
That's a great point. Sorry, carry on. Your brother.
Well, no, you make your point first.
Yeah, well, I've often referenced this Peep Show episode. It's a great episode. It's my favourite one. I love Peep Show, but it's my favourite episode where Jeremy gets called in to do jury duty. Jeremy's a feckless idiot, basically. And, obviously it's exaggerated because it's a comedy, but they're in the supermarket and, first of all, he says, I can't discuss this at all, Mark. I mean, it's confidential. And Mark goes, I'll buy you a bucket chicken. And he goes, okay, well, and then reveals all the details. And then they're discussing it. He's going, I'm just going to convict. She looks like the type anyway. And he's going, she looks like the type. And it's like, yeah, basically there's no smoke without fire. And, and I only think that's a slight exaggeration over something that could actually happen.
I think it can happen. I think it can, and it does happen. So I mean, it is potentially, and as I say, of course, when you come to appeal, a judgment, a really well written judgment by a good judge, you really have got you've got the meat to sort of get into what the issues really were, and they have to be analysed and they have to be addressed. And with a jury trial, you've just got none of that. You've just got the verdict and no scrutiny of how that verdict was reached at all, and that's very, very dangerous, I think. And particularly in a trial like this, I mean, it's okay for very petty things or very workaday things, because actually the view of an ordinary person is fine. But in a very complex medical case, to expect a jury of 12 random people to be making judgments on incredibly complex medical issues is just completely unrealistic and unreasonable.
Tell me a story about your brother, firstly.
Okay, I hope you don't mind. Well, my brother did jury service, and he did a law degree, but he just didn't like law. And he's very, very clever, my brother is. And it was a case where the police hadn't properly developed the case at all, really. I mean, they didn't produce the evidence that they should have done. They did a lot of things wrong. My brother, because he was legally trained, could see this. And anyway, they went to the jury room, and I think the woman in question thought she was going to be found guilty, and the police were very confident that it would be successful. And when they started, literally everybody said, well, she's clearly guilty. And my brother sort of did this incredibly skillful, where he went through every single thing and explained why he didn't think it was reasonable. And in the end, they reached a unanimous verdict, which followed my brother's reasoning. And this woman just couldn't believe that she'd been found not guilty. And the police, of course, were extremely unhappy about it. But it just shows that one very good juror who really understands what they're doing and can be persuasive can. Otherwise, if he hadn't been there, she would have definitely been found guilty. There's no doubt about it. All the others believed that she was guilty. And then, but it was him using his legal skills and using his knowledge and his persuasion to find what. And all he was doing was justifiably looking at the police evidence, which he knew wasn't correct and hadn't been done properly, and presenting that and saying, look, on this basis, we simply can't find her guilty. And in the end, that's what happened.
And I'm not blowing my own trumpet, but I do believe that if I was in the jury, I would have thought there was reasonable doubt, because it took me half an hour from listening to the case on the radio to think, hold on a second. I mean, this could, and then I learned a bit more and I learned a bit more. So I think I would be saying, look, before we send this woman away, you do understand she's never going to get out of prison ever. You do understand that. So before we do that, we do know that no one has witnessed anything. That's the first thing. So we don't even really have solid information that anything happened. That's the first thing. And then we know, she might not even be around for some of these things that supposedly hypothetically happened. And then, they're presenting this chart to us, but I mean, are we certain that chart is correct? Are we 100% certain that chart is correct? Because it can be incorrect. This is the kind of things I would be raising. I would want a very high bar of evidence before I send someone away forever. And I'm pretty sure I would have.
Agree, yeah.
I'm pretty sure I would have said there was reasonable doubt in every case. Obviously, now I think there's overwhelming doubt, but I'm pretty confident if I was in court, I would have thought, well, the prosecution hasn't proved there was a murder, let alone that Lucy is guilty. But there was someone.
The incident cases are interesting in that respect, because obviously the expert evidence came back that on the prosecution side they said there was clear evidence that there'd been insulin poisoning, and then the defense didn't have any evidence at all, so they had to go with the prosecution evidence, and the jury were told that there had been insulin poisoning, but that shouldn't have happened. I mean, I just don't know. I just don't know how Ben Myers allowed Lucy to agree and say there had been poisoning when clearly you couldn't say that.
I don't know. It's a strange one, isn't it? Let's look a bit further down. So someone's asking me a question about the forward of my book. So there are a few people in consideration. I can't really discuss this at this point in time. One thing the publisher did say to me is that the forward doesn't really sell the book. So I don't think it's as important as I thought. It would be a really good thing to have, but they think it's not as important as we thought. But there may be a forward, and it may be written by someone prominent. I think getting some blurb and some kind of commendations from credentialed people and well-known people will be good. So we'll probably try and do that as well. But it's not been finalized yet. But I mean, I'm actually at the moment, I'm working through like a legal read of my book. So it gets read from a legal perspective, and I'm asked to justify certain statements or trim certain things down, etc. So that's a quite laborious process. I am just over a third of the way through, maybe nearly getting close to halfway through. So I've got to do that by the end of February. So that actually is affecting what I can record for YouTube. So I've actually got 3 interviews in the bag recorded, and well, no, actually 4. And I'm going to do a 5th one, but one of those interviews I might not release for legal reasons, which I won't go into. But I've got 3 recorded interviews for YouTube now, and there's going to be a 4th one. So I don't know if I'm going to have time or what I'll have time to record, but I've got loads of other ideas of stuff that I want to record, but I don't know what time I'm going to have to do this month. So I might put out, I like to space interviews out if I can, but I might end up putting out more interviews than I usually would, just because I'm going through this quite involved process at the moment. But yeah, with regard to the forward, there probably will be one. It'll be probably by someone that you know, but that's still kind of under discussion. Do we think it likely Mark McDonald will tender a submission on the post-Letby babies who died and police told parents they weren't interested as they were post-Letby? So what do you think, Jonathan? Will he reference this?
I don't know. The problem is he's got so much evidence. I don't know what he's going to concentrate. He's going to have to concentrate on some of it more than others, and I just don't know really. I haven't really thought about it as much as I.
Yeah. I don't think he will. I don't think he will, because the court will just say that's nothing to do with this case. So I don't think it will be a focus, but it could be. But I don't think he will talk about that, because they will just say it's an item of no relevance.
No, I think that's right. Yeah.
So that the murders still stand, or attempted murders as well. There's a question about Dewi Evans here. I can't answer that question for legal reasons, so we'll just brush over that one, even though I would love to answer it, but I can't, unfortunately. Can someone point me to this NCA guidance on how the police should deal with complex medical cases by putting together a multidisciplinary panel? So whoever wrote that question, if you email me at lucy_letby_analysis@mail.com, I'll send you the documents. So just send me an email, because I've got them all. Let's go a bit further down. Do you have full blessing from Lucy's family on your analysis? So I haven't been in contact with Lucy's family, but actually the time is coming when I will need to write to Lucy's parents. And it will just be literally to tell them, I've written a book. This is why I've written a book. And just to inform them that it will be in the public eye again. You know, I would hope they would be favourable, and I think they probably will be, but I haven't sought their blessing because I felt that they're dealing with far too... I mean, I didn't consider myself important enough to say, hey, Lucy's parents, you need to speak to me. I mean, I'll write to them when the time's right, But I mean, they're going through enough. They need to be given the opportunity to lead, and as much as is feasible, they need to be given the opportunity to lead a normal life. I mean, obviously that must be impossible, but at least try and allow them to have a bit of space, you know. Can you get the book on an e-reader for those that are visually impaired? There'll be an ebook. I don't know about the visually impaired aspect of this, but there'll definitely be an ebook. Yes, 100% on the day of release. Do you know how many have pre-ordered your book? I don't get official figures on this. Obviously, the publisher can tell me, but Amazon won't tell me. But as I say, it was in the top. It was about 740 something on Amazon when it came out, which is really good for a pre-order book that no one even knows exists yet. Book really needs to hit America. Yeah, the intention is to do that, obviously. So yeah, so someone mentioned Lucy loves to read. So obviously I'll send a copy to Lucy, and she'll have the opportunity to read that. Hopefully it won't be too traumatizing for her. Do we know how Lucy's fellow inmates treat her in relation to her innocence? So I'll let Jonathan answer that one first.
The short answer is we don't. There's been quite a few sort of leaks from the prison about various things. We're never quite sure the validity of it, but I think it's safe to say, and there have been prisoners who've been released who have met her, and I've yet to hear any of them say a word against her. She seems to be very like she was when she was a nurse, sort of pleasant, likable, you know, down to earth. So I think, like anything, there'll be people who think she's guilty, and I think there was some sadly after the Netflix there was some that she was being sort of teased and bullied, but we don't really know. I can't say that we know for certain, but I think the evidence is that, you know, she's a very well-behaved, good prisoner who essentially gets on with everyone around her, as far as I can see.
Yeah. So there was a question earlier about JRAM and this referral by Sir David Davis. So I'll just mention briefly that you'll never hear anything about that again until Lucy is exonerated, because the police just will not investigate it. So I'll just mention that. The Thirwall inquiry is based on the assumption that Lucy is guilty. Presumably, if Lucy is exonerated, then Thirwall will be abolished. So one possibility, I don't think this is a likelihood, but it's a possibility, is that Thirwall will be postponed indefinitely, and then, as you described, Lucy will be exonerated, and then Thirwall will never report their findings. I don't think that's very likely, but it's just so hard to say what could happen. Theoretically, they should definitely report back before Lucy is exonerated, because Lucy won't be exonerated for. I mean, I have planned something for next year that I'm going to do. I don't want to share this at this point in time. I've told Jonathan already and a couple of other people, because it's an idea that I've had and I just wanted to float it. I don't think it will result in the kind of nuclear scenario, but if it did, then Lucy could be exonerated in a shorter time frame. But the whole reason for doing it is just to put as much pressure on as possible. I mean, ultimately, what would make a massive difference would be if one of the experts said, you know what, I've got it wrong, particularly Dr. Evans, and then Lucy could be exonerated very quickly. However, he's too arrogant to do that, and he knows he'd be in massive trouble, and he already is in massive trouble now. So I think the possibility of Lucy being exonerated before Thirwall reports is slim, very slim, but it's not impossible. Do you have any further thoughts on that, Jonathan?
We just cannot predict how Lady Thirwall. I mean, Lady Thirwall holds all the power with this, and she could do so. It really does depend on how she approaches the reporting of her inquiry, and we can't say any more than that. And none of us know her well enough, or nobody really knows her to be able to predict it. So as I keep saying, there is enormous possibility for good to come out of her inquiry if she decided to do and she could get advice. I mean, she could say, look, during the course of my inquiry, a lot of stuff has come out which I wasn't expecting, which has changed my view from my original remit, and therefore what flexibility do I have to sort of perhaps give a different to report differently than I expected that I would do. And also, I think she is potentially very powerful, having done this inquiry, to make recommendations to change how future medical criminal cases are because that essentially is her remit, is to sort of make sure that in the future, if there is medical criminality, that it's dealt with differently to how it was in this case. It's just how wide she goes, and as you and we all keep saying, we just have no idea exactly what she's going to do.
Oh, so a question I remember that I forgot to ask you was, so we were talking about juries and the problems with juries. Now, I must say that I'm not saying they should definitely be scrapped. I'm kind of ambivalent about it, but you mentioned some of the positives of having a judicial review of cases rather than a jury trial. So one thing that occurred to me while you were talking was it's hard to overturn a court case now. Would it become harder if a judge had made the decision, because we know the judges don't like to be contradicted in any way?
Well, no, because they'd have to write a judgment, and then with a judgment, you can go through it line by line, point by point, and you've got something to work on, and you can understand. And also, they explain their judgment. They explain why they've reached their verdict, and that's why juries are so haphazard, because you simply, it's just guilty or not guilty, and there's no comeuppance, there's no recall, there's no accountability whatsoever that a jury has. So that's why I've increasingly failed to understand what the big advantage of a jury trial. So I can sort of see it for sort of simple criminality. So, did somebody shoot somebody, or simple cases? Then I can see that there's a lot to be said for the fact that you're judged by your peers and not a judge. But for very, very complex, professional and sort of really, really academic stuff is being discussed in court, and papers and interpretation of papers, I just can't see that a jury can be expected or just can handle such complex cases, and therefore there's much larger chance that there will be a miscarriage of justice as a consequence.
Yeah. I mean, I take your point. That's a good point. Answers my question. So someone's asking me, is there any chance of bringing your book release forward? So I'll answer these questions one by one. No, there's no chance. It's time consuming, and it's just completely impossible. I keep wondering if Lucy might be released before your book. Not completely impossible, but very unlikely. I would love to gift her a copy of it, but there's probably a queue. So people are saying they're going to send copies to the police and all this kind of stuff. So if people want to buy extra copies and do this kind of thing, kind of activist things you could describe them as, then be my guest. Obviously, I won't ask for people to do that, but anything you want to do, please do it. Obviously, it's not my place to ask though. But yeah, it was difficult to kind of decide on a release date for this book. We're trying to get it out as quickly as we possibly can. This is the kind of shortest time frame that is feasible. One thing that you perhaps don't know is that you have to give bookshops a period, approximately 6 months lead-in, to inform them the book is going to be coming out and so forth. So you have to set a date early on. You have to give that period of time. So we set the date. I mean, pretty much as soon as I signed the contract, and they said they wanted to publish the book, we went into publishing mode. But you have to leave this six months period. So there's no way of getting out quicker. And also, we just haven't got time. I mean, I'm still working on it now, even though I've finished the final version, but there's still got to go through this legal read I'm doing now. Then there'll be another legal read from a lawyer. And then I've got to go and record the audiobook. They've got to print it. Thankfully, the cover's done, as you've seen. But yeah, there's just no way. This is the earliest possible date we could do. So let's go a bit further down. Thank you for all the comments. When Jonathan's here, I don't read them out, otherwise he'll go on forever, because we spend quite a lot of time answering the questions. But it helped. I really enjoy doing the live streams, but it does feel like an easier workload when it's not me on my own. Like three hours of constantly talking and constantly answering questions on your own. It's always nice. It's nice to have a guest for sure. Yeah, I'm not gonna. I don't want to talk about the Freemason element of this because I don't know anything about it, so I can't really comment. Let's go a bit further down. Yeah, I can't find any more questions at the moment, but I've still got quite a bit more time to go through. I'll just read out some comments if I can't find more questions. Maybe juries should have qualified people on them, forensics for murder, finance experts for fraud, etc. Just a thought. What do you think about that, Jonathan?
I think that's the sort of halfway house. I think you either go for a proper sort of real experts who have got a role. I think if you randomly choose people with a financial background, they may not have the expertise. So I think you either go all out for really expert people who really know exactly what they're doing and have a sort of real inquisitorial role, or not really. I think if just having a jury full of people who've got some interest may not be enough, I think.
Yeah. So one thing I would say is that I think the big thing to come out of this trial, the most important thing to come out of this trial, is the quality of expert evidence and the way that those experts are selected for the court. Because I do think that if the defense had had a fairer crack at it, and I mean, obviously we know now, if Lucy had these 31 experts in her defense, it's very, very likely, almost an open goal, that the jury would find her not guilty. So I don't think the jury was necessarily the key aspect of this case, even though I understand Jonathan's view and I don't disagree. But I think the big thing is to make sure good expert evidence appears in court and that good experts appear in court, because it's very clear that didn't happen in this case. And that...
Well, actually, there's been a very, very interesting article by Sarah Napton today, which came up all about experts. And did you see it actually? Because it came through our WhatsApp group. But it shows that the funding for I was absolutely amazed. The difference in funding for the defense and the prosecution is incredible, and also the amount of money you can spend for it. So, for example, whether you can have witnesses who are paid to be in court but not necessarily giving evidence. So it does show that there is an enormous gulf that needs to be looked at. So yeah, that's Sarah Napton. I think it's today, and it's the Daily Telegraph. Very, very good article about getting experts into criminal trials and the difference in what they're reimbursed and the terms that they can enjoy.
Yeah. I guess that's another key aspect, obviously, an uneven resources between the two sides. That might be acceptable in sport, where Man United play Torquay or someone, but not in a court case with very serious consequences. So that's obviously another aspect. A lot of the problems, Jonathan, in my view, just come down to the fact that the legal system is hierarchical and the people at the top are perfectly happy with the way that it runs now, and they don't see any need for it to change. Do you agree with that? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do. I mean, but I think it is getting worse. I mean, I think the government are really in the old days, there was a reasonable budget and they did pay reasonably well. But even in the civil courts and the stuff that I do, NHS Resolutions, which is the sort of government legal department, are just trying as hard as they can to sort of pay as little as possible. And so in the old days, I'd be asked to look at a case properly and I'd be asked to do a proper report. Now they're saying, we've got a cap on how much we can pay you and we don't want you to do a full report. All we want you to do is to draw some conclusions and if possible to give some reasoning for your conclusions, but that's all we want at this stage, and we might be able to get away with that and we'd need a bigger report. But even then they start saying if they need you to do more work, they say, oh, we're capped at 2 hours, or we're only prepared to pay you this amount of money. So it's not exactly making it sort of attractive to do anymore. Whereas in the old days, when I very first started, it was equally, it was nice. It was nice to do both sides. So, but certainly in recent years, the financial straitjackets just seem to be applied more and more.
Yeah, which, as we say, is wrong. So a question here is, given the unacceptable delay with the CCRC, how about going down the human rights route? So that's a valid question, but I think what you would find is that any kind of human rights application would, whoever instigated this would just be told, well, she's had a fair trial. The reason she's in prison is the outcome of a fair trial. I mean, I just don't think it would go anywhere, unfortunately. The only way is the legal route or a political route. The politicians don't want to do anything. So at the moment, the only route is the legal route. But, more political stuff may happen in the future. But, yeah, unfortunately, I can see what you're saying. But from a technical perspective, she hasn't had her human rights violated, as far as I would understand it. Have you approached Catherine DeBager or Karen Rees or anyone who offered support to Lucy for interviews? So I didn't approach Catherine DeBager because she still works for the Council of Chester, as far as I'm aware. So I thought it would be completely impossible for her to speak. However, I have spoken to someone who knows Lucy well and who offered her support at some length. So she's in the book. Let's go a bit further down. Do you think that Goss' retirement announcement, along with 2 of the appeal judges, is a coincidence, or have they seen the writing on the wall and leaving before it all hits the fan? So this, obviously, our answer to this question will be speculative because we don't know. But what do you think, Jonathan?
I don't think so, probably. I mean, I think Judge Goss was a reasonable age, and I'm not sure that I've seen him in a few trials since, actually. I mean, he's done a few criminal trials. You've seen him giving his judgment. I don't think I don't think so particularly.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think so either, for what it's worth. I think these people are quite secure in their position, probably. Let's go a bit further down. So would mainstream bookshops stock the book? Yes. We have no reason to believe otherwise. We think it's, going to be in mainstream bookshops. So, I mean, the intention is for me to appear and do book signings and such like, but we'll have to wait and see what happens. I don't know if that's going to happen or not, but certainly the intention is that that's going to occur. Thank you for all the kind remarks. I really appreciate them. I haven't read them all out because when there's two of us, we have a hard time getting through the comments as it is. But I haven't read them all out for that reason. But I have read them all internally, and I do appreciate them all. You commented that the witnesses should be like the consultants on the unit. If there's a civil case, yes, but for a criminal trial, it's the context of the unit and its failings that are important. Yeah, I mean, that's a fair comment. What I think, I think so. I think in this case, I don't know how you would ever address this, but one of the big problems in this case is that a lot of contextual information that was really important is not in the case. Now, the judge, we know, excluded the Royal College report. I mean, can you? It's a banal. It's almost banal question to say. Is there any good reason for that? Because there isn't. But like, how the court really here has failed to give the jury, like a relevant process, like relevant information, like a proper insight into the subject matter. So how could that change, Jonathan? How could it change so that in future that doesn't happen? It seems like a really difficult thing to deal with.
So I'm just moving because my phone's getting a bit low, so I'll just plug it in. So
no problem.
I just don't know really. I mean, I suppose the thing is that we've got to realise that every case is different, and I think most judges would have included the report, and I think in many ways a lot of it's down to Judge Goss and why he did what he did. I think in many other situations, then it would all just be. I mean, any other judge, I think, if they've been told by a very senior Court of Appeal judge that Dewey Evans was, questionable, then they would have taken action. So I think a lot of the case was down to the fact that Judge Goss didn't do things which we were expecting him to do. Really, I don't think it's the judicial process per se. It's probably more down to Judge Goss and how he managed this particular trial.
Yeah. Well, I can't see any conceivable reason why you wouldn't want that contextual information in the court case. It's vitally important.
Oh, absolutely. I can't understand why it wasn't allowed. He never really explained it, did he? I don't know what he just said. It wasn't to be used, and then didn't go on to explain why.
There isn't a good explanation. Right? Well, there isn't a good explanation. Yeah. How can he explain it? He seems like some technical legal argument or technical legal perspective that he has that I don't really understand, but I find it incomprehensible personally. It should just be in the case, shouldn't it? Obviously. So the question about the unions here, so Lucy's nursing union. So I don't know if you have an opinion on this, but this person states, I'm of the opinion that the union failed Lucy. Do you agree? So you can answer that first, Jonathan, please.
I suppose it's a political thing. I mean, at the outset, if a union feels that that Lucy was a murderer and that she did murder babies, then obviously you don't want to be on her side. But so I suppose you can see. I think that they've clearly taken at best they should take a neutral position because they don't want to be on the wrong side. But on the other hand, you would hope that when it became very obvious that Lucy, certainly at this stage now, one would hope that they would break cover. But I suppose you still got to remember that she is a convicted murderer still, and therefore Royal Colleges, nursing unions, are reticent unless they are very, very certain that she is going to be exonerated to be involved. And because if they prove to be on the wrong side, then reputationally it can be completely devastating to them.
Yeah.
So it takes a lot of courage to do the right thing, and it's probably easier for them just to say, well, she's a convicted murderer, we'll wait for the courts to decide, and not to be as proactive and as involved as perhaps one would hope they would be, because you hope a union will always stick up for its members and will do everything for them. But on the other hand, if it was thought that she was guilty, then obviously they wouldn't want to touch her with a barge pole.
Yeah, I think that we can't really expect the union to do anything now. It's not realistic, but they could have done something, and they probably should have represented her better back in 2016, 2017. However, I've discussed this previously. Organisations know what is in their own interest, and they know, if, as Jonathan has basically explained, if they get on the wrong side of it, they're going to be criticised. So it's a much, if let's say they did nothing to help Lucy and she'd been exonerated and all blown over, they don't really lose anything. Whereas if they get on Lucy's side and then she's found guilty, which she obviously was, they can be criticised for that. If they went out in public and made strong statements in her defence, maybe it would have helped her, but maybe it would have done nothing, and then maybe they would have opened themselves up to criticism. And organisations are just very wary of doing things like that. So that's why they didn't support her. Now that we can view that as very much wrong, and naturally people of our perspective do view it that way. But ultimately they have a natural kind of self-preservation of thinking, let's not get involved in this. And that's just the way it is, sadly. I have a question. Do you think Netflix severely misrepresented the case of police incompetence? And does that incompetence actually extend to prosecutorial misconduct? So I'll answer the first question first. So I think the Netflix documentary, certainly for people that know the case, but I think even for people that don't, gave a pretty good representation of how incompetent they are, because the police did not come out of it looking good. So I think, in a sense, even though it's supposed to be a puff piece to make the police look good, I don't think it did that, really. In terms of the prosecutorial misconduct, I don't know enough about this to comment. I don't think. So my understanding is the police are just the investigating arm. They're not the prosecutor. So can they be found to have engaged in prosecutorial misconduct? I don't know. Well, I'm sure obviously they can be found to have engaged in misconduct, but unfortunately, I think here the incompetence doesn't extend to that. It just is pure incompetence, and it's an inability to run a dispassionate, objective, competent investigation. And they tried their best, and you can't prosecute someone for doing a bad job. They should face consequences, but I don't think those consequences would be the type that you're hinting at here. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Really, I mean, what I suppose I've realised tonight that probably the Netflix was filmed very soon after the original trial. I thought it was obviously much later on, because I was amazed that they didn't address some of the questions which had already been looked at in such detail. But yeah, I mean, where do you start? I mean, effectively, there was incompetence at every level, at every stage, throughout the police investigation. I mean, it's just that's the amazing thing, that as the months have gone on, in fact, I thought very soon after the verdicts that everything will have been looked at, and that the public would lose interest. But actually, it seems that the more you delve into it, and the more you know, and the more you discover, the more incompetence you find. So just at absolutely every level.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a comment here that I just want to read about: a jury of neonatologists would have laughed this out of court, which is obviously true. Of course, one of the problems is, again, lack of funding. So the jury is not well paid, quite the opposite. And this would be one of the problems with getting an expert jury, is that you'd have to justify why you're doing that. And the money aspect would be enormous, because to pay 12 neonatologists to sit there in court for 10 months, you're going to have to pay them a hell of a lot more than you do now. And it would just make...
And you'd have to cover their work, of course. If they were in court, you'd have to get their work covered, which again would be extremely difficult.
Yeah. So I've investigated this previously on the channel, and I suspect there are less neonatologists in the country than Premier League footballers. There's probably only a few hundred. So if you had a jury of 12 neonatologists, okay, you get some pediatricians in there as well, but it's very, very difficult to do. So I think it's a non-starter to have expert juries, unfortunately. I just don't think there's not the resources, there's not the will to do it. It's too complex. I just don't think it's possible, unfortunately. In principle, if you had the best system, it might be a good idea, but it's just not going to happen. It's just not possible. Yeah, so this is a good question, a valid question. A couple here, a couple of shorter questions. During the trial, did Myers ever object to Johnson saying to Lucy, "Do you agree the baby was stable?" and so on? It was so frustrating. So I'm not aware that ever happened. I've not seen. I've don't. Maybe there was one. I can't remember what it was now, but I think Myers objected to one thing once, but I've seen very little in the way of objection from either. I don't know. I mean, let's not ask you that question, Jonathan. Let me ask you a different question. So, everyone's seen TV programs where they're always going objection every 5 minutes, and often these are set in America. Why? You would know a lot more about it than me. Do objections really feature in British court cases, and if not, why not?
They do come up quite a bit. I suppose you've got to be, especially in a jury case, because you don't want to get on the wrong side of the jury. You've got to use objections quite cleverly and quite skillfully, really, because you don't want to be objecting to everything. But on the other, so ideally, you should use an objection when you've got a really good objection and you're going to raise a really good point. But yeah, I think I don't know. I haven't seen the transcripts to the level that I can see whether or not Myers could have put more objections in. But all I would say is you've got to be quite skillful with objections, because you don't, particularly with juries, you don't want to annoy them or come across as there's a lot of skill in how you manage the jury in terms of keeping them on your side.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a fair comment. I'm still surprised that there weren't a few more objections based on what I've seen. But
yeah,
it's. I mean, you rightly point out that Ben Myers is treading a tightrope. He doesn't want the jury to start disliking himself, and particularly disliking Lucy, because he knows that would be very negative for her. So he may have used them, strategically, as you say. But I haven't seen him really object to anything. Lots of stuff he could have objected to and didn't, and the judge didn't object, so it just carried on. Which seems not ideal, but there you go. That's how it was. How it went. How it proceeded. Do you think the police made up the handover notes in chronological order story post trial, and that's why this detail has only just emerged on Netflix? It's a good question. I think that I do believe, and I don't say this to be inflammatory. I genuinely believe this. I do think there's a possibility that they don't understand what the word chronological means. So I think they don't realise that something isn't chronological if it's just a bit chronological, because the notes are not in chronological order. They're absolutely not, because it's an agreed fact that some of the notes were found in the Morrison's carrier bag, some of the notes were found in a bag for life, and I believe there were further notes in the bin bag in the garage. There were certainly some medical documents, or they describe them as medical documents. Something from the hospital was found there, and I believe there were handover notes there. So they absolutely categorically are not in chronological order. It's possible that some of the notes were in chronological order. So I think the first thing is, I think Daniel Stonier, who was the person who said this, can easily just not understand that they're not in chronological order. In terms of whether they made it up, that would mean they didn't make it up. It just means they don't understand what chronological means. But as to why the detail only just emerged, so basically, one thing that could happen is that the police could have passed this to Crown Prosecution Service and to the prosecution in the case, and the prosecution in the case could consider it to be either not accurate and not correct, or alternatively just of no merit. And so that's why it didn't appear in the court case. Whereas the police still think, oh, well, we think it's important that they're in chronological order, so we're going to mention it in the documentary. One of the things you have to remember is the police can only really talk about the circumstantial evidence because they can't talk about the medical evidence with any credibility, as they proved in their own YouTube film. So I don't think they necessarily made it up. I think it's more likely that they thought it was really significant, and they were either, well, they are wrong. Fundamentally, they are wrong. It's in chronological order, firstly. But I think possibly the prosecution barrister might have looked at it and thought, well, this doesn't have any relevance. But it is definitely possible they made it up, as you say, but I think it's probably something that just drifted away because, firstly, it's not true, and secondly, no one cares anyway. It doesn't mean anything. But that's just my opinion. What do you think?
No, exactly that. I don't think it's important. I don't even know why they brought it up, really. And quite clearly, a load of notes stuffed in a carrier, stuffed in a Morrison's bag or a bin liner in the garage isn't going to be in strict sort of the definition of chronological order. It's just not going to happen. So it's irrelevant anyway. Really, it's completely irrelevant.
Yeah. I mean, it's possible that a small number of sheets in that box were in chronological order, but that doesn't mean, obviously, that they all were, or that the sheets can be the handover sheets can be said to be in chronological order anyway. Of course, the handover sheets are nothing to do with the case. As I get sick of saying this, but they're nothing to do with the case. They're nothing to do with the allegations. They're completely irrelevant. They can be in reverse order. They can be in random order. They can be used as toilet paper. It doesn't make any difference. They're nothing to do with the case. I'd have to emphasize that once more. Yeah, so we're coming up to 3 hours now, so that's usually the point where I stop. So thank you to Jonathan for joining us again. I really appreciate it.
As always, it's a huge pleasure.
Yeah. Thanks again. We're going to do this thing of a more celebratory live stream at some point.
Yeah.
It's a good idea. But I think that will be in March at the earliest because I haven't got the time to think about it.
Well, I think we talked about this, and then so much came up in this very short time that it seemed a bit. So and also you're incredibly busy at the moment. So, but it'd be very nice to do it because I think a lot of it's quite heavy going. What we talk about week in, week out, and just to reflect on where we've come from and some of the great achievements, and what and just how far we've come would be great.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, so we'll do that in the future. I've got a busy month this month. So let me just say in closing, just to remind you that there's this film coming out from Guy on the 19th. So I'll remind people about that, but we need to try to amplify that as much as possible. And
Can you tell us what it's about? What's it actually about? I mean, what's the emphasis of it?
You can see a trailer online. It's looking at the police investigation from a more critical perspective, you could say. But I mean, it's the kind of information that I will talk about. But like Jonathan's a TV producer, not Jonathan. Guy's a TV producer, and can do like, I can't do very much really. I just do what I'm capable of. But he can do proper graphics, filming. So it's very. I mean, I've seen it, so it's very good. So it's definitely worth watching. And I thought it would be nice for me to just make sure that he can have a free pathway. So I won't release anything on that day. And then my next video, someone's saying, where can I see this documentary by Guy? So if you look up Lucy Letby films, but I will put a link to it as soon as it comes out, and I'll remind people to check it out tomorrow. But it's on the Lucy Letby Films channel. So my videos will resume on the 20th, and apparently John Sweeney's just put a part 3 out, so I'll have to watch that. My videos will resume on the 20th, probably put an interview out. As I say, I've recorded several interviews, and I like to space them out, but I might end up putting them out in quite a short period of time, given that I'm extremely busy. But we'll see how it goes. I'd like to record it. I've got some stuff that no one has seen yet to record, so I really want to do that. But I'll do that as soon as I can. But yeah, thank you for everyone's comments. Thank you for being here as always. It's I get to read all the comments. Jonathan doesn't, but they've all been very complimentary towards both of us, and we really appreciate that. And that's it. Like I said, I'm supposed to try and get Keek up at the end, aren't I? Keeks, you coming? Are you hungry? Are you hungry for something to eat? Shall we get you something to eat? Shall we? Come here then. Here she is. There she is.
Hey, fantastic. Finally. There we are.
Hello. Are you hungry?
Hello.
Are you hungry? She likes to do that and stab me in the neck, don't you, Keeks? That's your favourite move. Do you want foodies? Do you want foodies? I better get some food now. Yeah, so thanks again, Jonathan. We'll see you again soon. Hopefully you can come on again next month. And thank you for all the support. Like the last couple of weeks have been crazy actually, because I got so many subscribers and so many views and so many comments. So it's really elevated the channel. So let me just mention one last thing before I go. Some people have been doing this hype thing. I don't know how it works. I don't know how to do it myself. I've never been given the option to hype a video. Apparently there's a hype leaderboard. I can't seem to watch it on my phone. I asked ChatGPT, and ChatGPT said, you can't view it on your phone. So I don't understand anything about it, but if you get a chance to hype things, then that helps seemingly quite a lot. So I just thought I'd mention that. But yeah, goodbye to everyone, and see you, Jonathan, and we'll speak again soon.
Great. Okay. Lovely. Thanks. Bye.
Cheers. Bye now.